Zhihua had ever seen. "What do you think, shopkeeper Su?" Chen Dao asked. "Do you want to move to our Qinjia village?" Hearing this, Su Zhihua and Su Qiaoshi exchanged a glance, thought for a moment, and then said, "I am willing to move to Qinjia village, but it will probably take some time. I need to dispose of the items in Baichao Hall first." After all, Su Zhihua still has the Baikayatang business in the county town. He needs to dispose of all the herbs and shops in Baikayatang before moving to Qinjia village. "That's fine," Chen Dao said. "Shopkeeper Su, please make some preparations first. I will take you to Qinjia village next time I go to the city. Then I'll trouble you, Mr. Chun." Su Zhihua nodded with a smile and chatted with Chen Dao about what would happen after moving to Qinjia village. Su Qiaoshi would also interject from time to time, a smile on her face, as if she was extremely looking forward to moving to Qinjia village. Of course, more importantly, Qinjia village is safe enough, and I can see Xiao Yuan every day. Half an hour later, Chen Dao walked out of Baikayatang and got on a donkey cart with Chunda and others, heading straight out of the city. When they arrived outside the North City gate, as expected, the goods on Chen Dao and others' carts attracted the attention of the refugees again. However, there were many strong men on the donkey carts, so the refugees did not dare to act rashly. Soon, the donkey cart drove away from the city gate and onto the official road. "Stop!" But at this moment, Chen Dao shouted and asked Chen Si, who was driving, to stop the car and look forward vigilantly. But for some reason, a large number of people appeared on the official road ahead, blocking it completely. Another bandit? Chunda and others immediately became alert and looked at the crowd opposite with full readiness. At this moment, a man with a hideous scar on his face stepped out from the crowd opposite. He cast a fierce look at Chen Dao and said, "Hand over all the goods on the cart and the silver on you, and I will let you pass." "Who are you?" Chunda stared at the person opposite with sharp eyes, holding the bow and arrow in his hand, ready to shoot at any time. "I'm Qin Jiang from the Black Tiger Gang." The scarred man spoke loudly with his head held high and chest puffed out, seeming to be very proud of his identity. This was indeed the case. Although the Black Tiger Gang, the largest gang in Taiping County, was considered unreputable by the government and the three major families, for ordinary people, this name was quite intimidating. Even the people in the county town are even more afraid of the Black Tiger Gang than the government. After all, the government is somewhat reasonable, while the Black Tiger Gang is completely unreasonable. Black Tiger Gang? Chunda and the others all turned pale. Even the villagers of Qinjia village, like them, had heard of the name of the Black Tiger Gang. This gang, formed by the city's ruffians and hooligans, might not be able to do anything big, but they were the best at harming the people. Their reputation in the county was so bad that it could be smelled for 10 miles. Chapter 129, Cut into Pieces. Black Tiger Gang. Chen Dao's eyes flashed with brilliance. He knew something about the Black Tiger Gang. As far as he knew, this gang usually only operated in the county town. But now, contrary to its usual practice, they went out of the city and stopped him with a clear purpose. This was a bit strange. He had almost no connection with the Black Tiger Gang, and he rarely went to the city each time. How could he be targeted by the Black Tiger Gang? Chen Dao couldn't think of an answer to this question for the time being. On the other side, the man who gave his name, Qin Jiang, grinned and said, "You must have heard of the name of my Black Tiger Gang. Hand over all the goods in the cart and the money on your body, and I can leave you with an intact body. Hand over your money, and I'll leave you with your whole body. Hand over your money, and I'll leave you with your whole body. Hand over your money, and I'll leave you with your whole body." The Black Tiger Gang members behind Qin Jiang loudly echoed Qin Jiang's words, looking at Chen Dao and others as if they were fat sheep to be slaughtered. There were more than 30 of them, and everyone was holding a blade. In contrast, Chen Dao and others on the opposite side had no other weapons except the bow and arrow in Chen Dao's hand. Naturally, they were fearless. Another bunch of greedy fools. Chen Dao sighed inwardly and said to Xiao Yuan, kill them. "Brother Chen, you go too." As soon as Chen Dao finished speaking, Xiao Yuan immediately jumped off his shoulder, turned into a shadow, and ran straight towards the people opposite. At the same time, Chen Sheng also moved. He seemed to have no fear of the sharp weapons in the hands of the Black Tiger Gang. His strong figure rushed toward the opposite group like a running rhinoceros. Still dare to resist? Qin Jiang never expected that in the face of so many of his people, the other side would actually dare to take the initiative to attack. A heart-wrenching cry of pain came from behind him. Qin Jiang turned around, and his pupils trembled. He saw that behind him, a member of the Black Tiger Gang had been torn apart, with his head flying into the sky and the headless body falling powerlessly to the ground. And it was Madoka who caused the minion's death. After advancing to the Golden Claw Red Panda, Xiaoyuan's attack power is obviously stronger, and its claws are stronger and sharper. With one swing of its claw, it can directly cut a person's neck along with the bones. What is this? Qin Jiang subconsciously wanted to see Xiaoyuan's figure clearly, but Xiaoyuan didn't give him any chance at all. He turned into a residual shadow and shuttled through the crowd, taking a life almost every breath. Go away. Don't come over here. Go away. Don't come near me. The remaining minions were terrified and instinctively waved their weapons to try to drive Xiaoyuan away, but it was obvious that their weapons posed no threat to Xiaoyuan. Instead, there were more and more dead bodies on the ground, and the fear in their hearts became stronger and stronger. When Qin Jiang brought them here to rob, he only said that there was a fat sheep, but he did not say that there was such a horrible thing around the fat sheep. At this time, everyone could not help but blame Qin Jiang. If Qin Jiang had not brought them out, how could they have experienced such a horrible thing? Qin Jiang looked at his men who fell to the ground like straws, his eyes dull. But at this moment, there was a noise behind him, and Qin Jiang almost instinctively rolled on the ground because of human intuition about danger. Quick reaction. Chun Cheng's punch missed, so he put away his fist, took a step forward, and stepped on Qin Jiang on the ground. Qin Jiang's expression changed, and he rolled on the ground like a mud monkey, dodging the attack from Chun Cheng. Bang! Chun Cheng kicked down but failed to hit Qin Jiang, but a dent appeared on the ground where he stepped, which shows how powerful his strength was. Warrior! Qin Jiang was shocked, and only then did he realize that he might have hit a wall. This group of people were not the fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered as he had imagined, but a piece of iron that could not be any harder. Not only are there warriors in the team, but there are also beasts that reap human lives like ghosts. What virtue and ability did Qin Jiang have to treat this group of people as fat sheep? At this moment, Qin Jiang was regretting his decision so much that he wanted to kill the owner of Yuan's pharmacy, who told him the false news. You're pretty good at hiding, huh? Chun Cheng said as he looked at Qin Jiang, who rolled several times and stood up after creating some distance. Qin Jiang ignored the dust on his body and forced a smile, saying, "My dear fellow, if I say this is a misunderstanding, would you believe me?" Hearing the screams of his men one after another, Qin Jiang was really scared. He brought a total of 30 men with him, and more than half of them had died in a short while. He himself was also targeted by warriors. If this continued, Qin Jiang felt that he would be in great danger. "Brother Cheng, leave him alive." But at this moment, Chun Dao shouted from a distance, and Chun Cheng immediately understood and threw a punch. Bang! Unable to dodge, Qin Jiang felt a huge force coming from his chest, and then Qin Jiang's eyes bulged, and his whole body flew into the air in an instant, then fell heavily to the ground. His whole body seemed to have been run over by a cart, and he didn't have the strength to lift it up. At the same time, screams continued to be heard. Ah! 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 Xiao Yuan's ghostly figure shuttled among the Black Tiger Gang's minions, and his sharp claws took away one life after another. In a short while, all 30 minions of the Black Tiger Gang fell to the ground. At this time, Xiaoyuan's figure reappeared in everyone's sight. It was seen that Xiaoyuan still looked so naive at this time. The round face of brown and white looked cute and seemed to pose no threat. However, Chunda and others did not dare to underestimate it all. This seemingly harmless little Yuan is actually a terrifying creature that just took 30 lives. Brother Dao, Chun Cheng brought Qin Jiang, who was breathing more out than in, to Chun Dao and said, "I left him with one breath." Very good. Chun Dao looked at Qin Jiang, who was pretending to be dead, and asked, "Qin Jiang from the Black Tiger Gang?" It's me. Qin Jiang, knowing that Chun Dao was the leader of this gang, nodded hurriedly and said, "I'm from the Black Tiger Gang. Please spare my life, sir." Hearing this, Chun Dao couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. These gangsters were really ridiculous. When facing good people, they were extremely cruel, but when facing people who were stronger than them, they would beg for mercy shamelessly. The phrase, bullying the weak and fearing the strong, was the best explanation for this kind of people. "Who asked you to come and stop us?" Chun Dao asked. He had no connection with the Black Tiger Gang, so there should be no reason for the Black Tiger Gang to target him. It's Yuan Hua, the owner of Yuan's pharmacy. When mentioning the name Yuan Hua, Qin Jiang clenched his teeth, and a hint of ferocity flashed in his eyes, as if he wanted to tear Yuan Hua into pieces. If Yuan Hua had not given him false information, how could Qin Jiang become someone else's prisoner and lose so many brothers? Chapter 130, I'm so happy I can die. It turned out to be him. Chun Dao suddenly realized that it was no wonder that the Black Tiger Gang, who had no connection with him at all, targeted him. It turned out that they had received information from the owner of Yuan's pharmacy. It seems that the wealth that he exposed still attracted the covetousness of others. A dangerous light flashed in Chun Dao's eyes. He didn't like the feeling of being targeted, and he hated being treated as a fat sheep even more. Since the owner of Yuan's pharmacy had threatened his life and property, he had no choice but to send him to see the king of hell as soon as possible, even though he was backed by the Yuan family, one of the most powerful families in the county. Sheng Yi. Chun Dao winked at Chun Cheng. Chun Cheng, who frequently interacted with Chun Dao, naturally knew what this meant. He bent the hand that was holding Qin Jiang's neck with force. Crack! The next moment, a crisp sound of broken bones was heard. Qin Jiang couldn't even scream. His eyes gradually lost their luster, and he completely stopped breathing. Looking at Qin Jiang's corpse, Chun Da and others looked at each other in surprise. It was not because they were afraid of the dead body, but because they were shocked by Chun Cheng's strength. Just now, Chun Cheng defeated Qin Jiang, who was holding a sharp knife, with his bare hands. Chun Da and others also noticed that when Chun Cheng stepped on Qin Jiang, he left small holes on the ground. Brother Cheng, Chun Jiang asked in disbelief, "Are you a warrior?" Hey. Chun Jiang scratched his head and smiled innocently. Thanks to Brother Dao, I just became a 9th-rank warrior 2 days ago. When these words were spoken, Chun Da, Chun Si, Chun Jiang, and others were all shocked. Although they had guesses in their hearts, when they heard Chun Cheng's affirmative answer, they couldn't help but be stunned. What is a warrior? Even in the county town, warriors are high-ranking figures. As for Shaoqun Village, they are legendary figures. There are more than 100 households in Shaoqun Village, but there has never been a warrior. Chun Cheng is the first. Everyone couldn't help but look at Chun Dao. They noticed what Chun Cheng said, thanks to Brother Dao. This meant that Chun Cheng became a warrior with the help of Chun Dao. In fact, even if Chun Cheng didn't say it, everyone knew that his ability to become a warrior must be related to Chun Dao. Although everyone had no specific idea of how to become a warrior, it was certain that becoming a warrior required a lot of money. Considering Chun Cheng's family was so poor that they could barely make ends meet, there was no possibility for him to become a warrior at all. Brother Dao, Chun Si's eyes were filled with desire. Do you think I have a chance to become a warrior? The others also looked at Chun Dao with burning eyes. Even Chun Da was no exception. There was no other way. The temptation of becoming a warrior was too great. The identity of a warrior symbolizes not only a transcendent status, but also powerful strength. In today's chaotic world, everyone has a strong desire for power. Chun Dao looked at the people with burning eyes, nodded with a smile, and said, "Don't worry, everyone will have the opportunity to become a warrior in the future." The relationship between Chun Da, Chun Si, Chun Jiang, and Chun Dao has been verified by time. When a number of chickens is sufficient in the future, Chun Dao will definitely consider training them into warriors as a priority to strengthen the military force of Qinjia Village. Very good. Chun Jiang cheered. For some reason, at this moment, he suddenly remembered the young man in brocade, clothes whom he had met in the grain store. Chun Jiang still remembered the young man's contemptuous look. Just wait. Wait until I become a warrior, and see if you still dare to look at me like that. Chun Jiang said, so in his heart. Chun Da and the others also looked happy. Chun Dao always kept his word. Since Chun Dao said that he could make them become warriors, he would definitely not go back on his word. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but imagine the days after becoming warriors. All right, everyone, get in the car and head back to the village. Chun Dao interrupted everyone's reverie, asked everyone to get on the donkey cart, and headed towards Qinjia Village, leaving only 31 corpses on the official road. These corpses will naturally not be wasted. Perhaps they will be used by passing refugees or wild beasts that roam at night. Qinjia Village. Looking at the slowly approaching donkey cart, the villagers who had just finished their farm work and were queuing outside Chun Dao's house to receive steamed buns couldn't help but look envious. There are so many things in the car. I saw piles of new cloth and even food. Brother Dao's family is really wealthy. Every time they go to the city, they buy a lot of things. That's right. I wonder when my family can live a good life like Brother Dao. Facing the envious gazes of the villagers, Chun Dao asked Chunda and others to help unload all the grain, cloth, and salt from the cart, and then move them into the house bag by bag. The villagers consciously made way for Chunda and others to move their things into the house, but envy could not help but show in their eyes. That cloth seems to be cotton. Chungo looked at the cloth that Chunda was carrying and tightened his clothes involuntarily. The clothes he wore were made of the lowest quality linen with patches on them. They were extremely ineffective in keeping out the cold, and their warmth was far from comparable to that of cotton. Chungo remembered that when he was young, his family's living standard was quite good. One Chinese New Year, his mother made him a set of clothes with cotton cloth. The new clothes made Chungo happy for several days. He wore out every day and was reluctant to even wash it. Unfortunately, cotton clothes are a thing of the past after all. As he grew older, his family's financial situation took a turn for the worse. Chungo had forgotten how long it had been since he had worn cotton clothes. He could only afford patched and numb clothes. The warmth of cotton cloth only remained in the beautiful memories of his childhood. This cotton is the finest fabric. An old woman said this, her eyes full of envy. For an old person like her, cold weather is even more terrifying. And in this case, cotton cloth with great warmth retention effect becomes particularly coveted. Aunt Lee is so lucky. She gave birth to a son as capable as Dao Ge. Yeah, if my child could have half the ability of Dao Ge, I would be satisfied. Don't even mention Dao Ge's half ability. If my son could have even 10% of Dao Ge's ability, I would be so happy. Looking at the things being unloaded from the truck, the villagers were filled with emotion, feeling that it would be a great honor to have a son like Chun Dao. After all, they have witnessed Chun Dao's abilities with their own eyes. Not only has he made his family live a rich life, but he has also provided steamed buns for the whole village. If their sons could have Chun Dao's abilities, most of the villagers would probably be overjoyed. The villagers sighed and smiled as they accepted the steamed buns distributed by Chun Dao's family, and then returned to their homes in groups of 3 or 2. Chapter 131 I Hope So. After the villagers left, Chun Dao also came to the backyard and said to Chun Lian and others who had just finished feeding the chickens, Sister Lian, "Why are you still here? Go home quickly." Upon hearing this, Chun Lian and others realized that the sun was about to set, and if they didn't go back, it would probably be dark. "Brother Dao, let's go now." Chun Lian and others did not dare to delay and quickly put down their work, said goodbye to Chun Dao, and left hand in hand. After they left, Chun Dao took out the medicinal herbs he had just bought today and began to feed the chickens, ducks, Da Huang, Xiao Wang, and Xiao Yuan with advanced medicinal herbs. Chun Dao must upgrade all of the 30 ruddy shell ducks, because although ruddy shell ducks produce a lot of meat, their reproductive capacity is average. At least so far, ruddy shell ducks have not been able to successfully hatch new ducklings. Only by training them into white-feathered ducks can they reproduce stably and quickly like yellow-feathered chickens and rapidly increase the number of ducks. As for the breeding of the chicken flock, Chun Dao did not plan to breed too many iron-feathered chickens, because he only bought 7 coxcombs this time, which could only breed 1 iron-feathered chicken. After giving the purchased herbs to the animals, Chun Dao returned to the kitchen and had dinner with everyone. There were still quite a few guests dining at home today. In addition to Chun Dao's family of 3, Ding Xiaohua and her daughter, there were also Chun Dao's family, Chun Sheng, and others. In addition to plenty of steamed buns, the food on the table also included a large bowl of egg drop soup. As the number of yellow-feathered chickens in the house increases, the daily egg production also increases. The eggs produced by these yellow-feathered chickens that fail to hatch will be collected by the careful Chun Lian and then served on the dining table of Chun Dao's family. Today's egg drop soup obviously uses a lot of eggs. The egg drops floating in the soup make Chun Si and others salivate. "Let's eat." After Chun Dao sat down, dinner began. Everyone ate egg drop soup with steamed buns and seemed very satisfied with the meal. After dinner, Chun Da and others left. The women in the house were responsible for cleaning up the dishes, while Chun Dao returned to the bedroom and lay on the bed thinking about what happened today. Yuan Hua. When Chun Dao thought of this name, he couldn't help but think of the old face of the shopkeeper of Yuan's pharmacy. His large spending at Yuan's pharmacy had obviously made Yuan Hua see him as a fat sheep. He even contacted the Black Tiger Gang to seize Chun Dao's wealth. Unfortunately, Chen Dao's wealth is not so easy to get. Today, Chen Dao is not only an 8th rank warrior, but also has Xiao Yuan to protect him. The Black Tiger Gang, a lowly gang, cannot threaten Chen Dao at all. However, although Qin Jiang from the Black Tiger Gang did not have any impact on Chen Dao already bore a grudge against Yuan Hua. Chen Dao has always adopted the strategy of eradicating the root of the problem when it comes to those who threaten his life and property. He has already made plans to get rid of Yuan Hua. As for how to get rid of it, of course, they would go to his house and kill him. Chen Dao had no power in the county and could not find Yuan Hua's residence, so he had to go to the pharmacy to look for him. But if you want to get rid of Yuan Hua, the Yuan family will have to consider it. Chen Dao knew very well that the shopkeeper who was in charge of doing business and managing the family's industries was often not taken seriously in the family. In other words, Yuan Hua was at most a marginal figure in the Yuan family. But even if he is a marginal figure, he is from the Yuan family. Once I kill Yuan Hua, I am afraid the Yuan family will not let it go. Perhaps we can bring Li Hu and Su Jiwen along? A gleam of light flashed in Chen Dao's eyes. Today's communication with Su Jiwen and Li Hu made Chen Dao realize that these two people were not on good terms with the 3 major families in the county. Otherwise, they would not have wiped out the Zhu family. Adhering to the principle that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Chen Dao felt that he could completely unite with Su Jiwen and Li Hu to fight against the Yuan family, and even wipe out the Yuan family. Chen Dao had no burden in his heart when it came to wiping out the entire Yuan family. These big families were not good people. They occupied the people's fertile land and squeezed the people's blood. It could be said that their extravagant lives were all obtained by exploiting the people. Chen Dao, who always regarded himself as an ordinary person, naturally did not care about the life and death of the Yuan family. Next time you go to the city, you can give it a try. Chen Dao, thinking about these things, slowly fell asleep. The next day, as soon as the sky brightened, the entire Qinjia village seemed to come alive. Villagers carried their farm tools and walked out of their homes, heading towards Chen Dao's house in groups of 2 or 3, full of enthusiasm. We can eat steamed buns again. Our lives are so good now. This is all thanks to Brother Dao. If it weren't for him, how could we live such a good life? Yes, our Qinjia village has a Dao gear, which is really a blessing for our village. Did you see the village chief of Xiao village a few days ago? When I was eating steamed buns, he kept staring at me. His eyes almost popped out. Yes. Bald Chong from Xiao village is just jealous of our life. That's right. My fields are closer to Xiao village, so every day I can see Bald Chong watching me work from afar. Haha, Baldy Chong is so envious of the life we have in our village. He and his son watch us work in the fields every day. The villagers are generally very satisfied with their current lives, especially after comparing their lives with those of the villagers in Xiao village. They're even more satisfied. It is said that happiness comes from comparison. When the villagers of Qinjia village thought about the fact that they could not even get enough bran to eat and had to stay at home every day to reduce consumption, while they could eat steamed buns every meal, the smiles on their faces became brighter and a sense of happiness arose in their hearts. What is the village chief saying to Dao? Good. The villagers near Chen Dao's house suddenly discovered that the village chief Chen he had arrived early and was standing in front of Chen Dao's house, discussing something with Chen Dao. Brother Dao, good morning. Chen he greeted Chen Dao and continued. The seeds have been sown in the fields now. We just have to see if they sprout later. Although Chen Dao always showed confidence, Chen he was still unsure, fearing that the wheat seeds planted in the ground would not grow. If it fails to grow, the life of the people in Qinjia village will probably immediately return to the original state of eating bran for every meal. Don't worry, village chief. Chen Dao noticed Chen he's anxiety and said with a smile, this wheat will definitely grow. I hope so. Chen he said that throughout his 40-year life, he had never seen any crops that could grow in such cold weather, so he naturally had no confidence in his heart. Chapter 132, It's Better to Buy Meat. By the way, village chief. Just as Chen he turned around and was about to organize the villagers to line up, Chen Dao suddenly called him. You have something to tell the villagers. Gather them together. Become. Chen he didn't ask what was going on. He just walked towards the villagers who were gathering and said, Everyone, please be quiet. Brother Dao has something to tell you. Upon hearing this, the chatting villagers immediately quieted down and looked at Chen Dao curiously, waiting for his speech. Chun Dao didn't keep them waiting for long and said directly, I heard a piece of news when I went to the city yesterday. It's very likely that you won't have to pay the tax increase this time. When Chun Dao said this, both the village chief Chun He and the ordinary villagers were stunned. Brother Dao, are you kidding us? Brother Dao, this is no joke. The government doesn't require us to pay taxes? How is that possible? The villagers looked at Chun Dao in disbelief. It was not that they did not believe Chun Dao, but what Chun Dao said was too outrageous. Since ancient times, there has never been an example of the government canceling the tax increase. I'm not kidding you. Chun Dao said seriously, I heard this from the county magistrate myself in the county. If you don't believe me, you can ask Chun Guer. Hearing this, everyone turned their eyes to Chun Cheng, who had just walked up to Chun Dao. Everyone knew Chun Cheng's personality. He was honest, simple, and even a little silly. For someone like him, the probability of him telling lies was almost zero. Cheng Ji, is what Dao Ji said true? Brother Cheng, is the tax increase really canceled? Brother Cheng, please speak quickly. Oh, I'm so anxious. Facing the anxious gazes of the crowd, Chun Cheng recalled the previous conversation between Chun Dao, Su Jiwen, and Li Hu at the Fuhu boxing gym, and nodded. Brother Dao is telling the truth. This tax increase is indeed going to be canceled. Although Chun Cheng is honest and straightforward, he is not stupid. Although Su Jiwen did not explicitly say that he wanted to cancel the tax increase in the Fuhu boxing gym before, that was indeed what he meant. Therefore, the probability of canceling the tax increase is almost 99%. Are you really going to cancel it? Is there such a good thing? The villagers looked at each other in disbelief, but at the same time, they felt endless joy in their hearts. The cancellation of the tax increase was definitely a great joy for them, as it meant that they no longer had to spend 2 taels of silver. Brother Dao, at this moment, the village chief, Chun He, suddenly thought of something and asked, if the tax increase is canceled, what will happen to the rent you paid for our land? Chun He knew very well that the reason Chun Dao was willing to pay 2 taels of silver as rent was entirely because he wanted to help the villagers pay their taxes. But now, the tax increase has been canceled. Will Chun Dao still pay them rent? Not only Chun He was concerned about this issue, but other villagers were also concerned. They all looked at Chun Dao's face, waiting for his answer. Although they are already very satisfied with eating steamed buns every day, people's yearning for a better life is endless. Many villagers have even begun to fantasize about how to use this huge wealth after receiving 2 taels of rent. Don't worry, everyone. Chun Dao, who was being watched by everyone, smiled and said, although the tax increase has been canceled, I will continue to pay everyone the rent of 2 taels of silver. Everyone will receive this money within a month. After Chun Dao finished speaking, the scene fell into a brief silence, and then the villagers burst into thunderous cheers. Brother Dao is so good to us. That's right, the tax increase is gone, and Brother Dao is actually willing to give us money. If anyone dares to say anything bad about Dao Guer in the future, I will never forgive him. To be honest, many villagers had already prepared themselves for Chun Dao to cancel the rent. After all, the reason Chun Dao was willing to pay 2 taels of silver in rent was entirely to help them get through the tax increase. But now that the tax increase has been canceled, Chun Dao is still willing to give them 2 taels of silver per household. At this moment, the villagers' favorable impression of Chun Dao reached its maximum, which means that Chun Dao had no intention of competing for the position of village chief. Otherwise, they would probably have directly promoted Chun Dao to the position of village chief at this time. Looking at the jubilant villagers, Chun Dao smiled. He could have canceled the rent, but he didn't because the villagers were living a very hard life. So Chun Dao was willing to help them to the best of his ability. After all, Chun Dao was also a member of Chinjia village. All right, Chun Dao clapped his hands, signaling for everyone to quiet down, and then said, everyone, hurry up and get your breakfast, then get back to work. Upon hearing this, the villagers immediately lined up and entered the front yard of Chun Dao's house one after another. After receiving the steamed buns, they walked towards the farmland in groups of 3 or 2, carrying farm tools and chatting happily as they walked. Daughter-in-law, Mr. Chun, who was walking with his wife Lu Jie and his son Chun Go, suddenly asked, what are you going to do with the money after it's distributed? The person who has been in charge of the finances in Chun Go's family has always been his mother Lu Jie. In fact, it's not just Chun Go's family, but the entire Qinjiao village is mostly like this, with the women in the family managing the finances. I plan to find a wife for Gogo. Lu Jie thought for a moment and said, Chungo is already 15 years old and old enough to get married, so his marriage should be settled as soon as possible. I don't want to get married. Chungo just shook his head like a rattle. I want to eat meat. If you ask me, I'd rather use these 2 taels of silver to buy meat. Was only 15 years old, actually didn't understand matters between men and women. Or rather, at this age, he didn't have those things in his mind at all. He only thought about eating meat and playing. All they do is eat. Lu Jie glared at Chungo, feeling a little annoyed. Marrying a wife was a big deal to continue the family line, but this stupid son didn't care at all. Instead, he was obsessed with eating meat. It was really annoying. Chungo seemed a little afraid of Lu Jie, and quickly shrank his neck, but the expression on his face was very firm. He didn't want to get married, at least not now. He wanted to eat meat. Hey, Mr. Chin smiled and patted Chungo's head. He knew that his son had always been very opinionated and clever, so he had no intention of forcing Chungo. He just said, Don't worry, Goa. When Dower gives us money, we will definitely buy you some meat. Really? Chungo asked with shining eyes. Eating meat was too tempting for a kid of his age. Chapter 133 Blood Claw Red Panda. Of course it's true. Mr. Chen smiled and nodded, and the family went to the farmland, talking and laughing, and started a day's work. Conversations similar to the one in Chun Sheng's family were happening everywhere. While working, the villagers discussed the use of 2 taels of silver with their relatives or friends. When Brother Dao gets his pay, I plan to buy some new clothes for my family. What about you? I also plan to buy some cloth to make clothes. It's so cold now, and I can't bear not having new clothes. I plan to buy more food and store it. I'm going to eat some more meat. I haven't had meat in 3 years. Brother Dao is really good to us. With these 2 taels of silver from Brother Dao, life in our village will definitely be much better. The villagers working in the fields had glowing eyes, looking forward to the day when Chun Dao would pay the money. At Chen Dao's house, Li Ping, Ding Xiaohua, and He Zulian, who had already cleared the dishes, were taking measurements for Chun Taidan, Chun Fei, and Xiu Jie. After Li Ping used a ruler to measure the height, waist circumference, and other data of the 2 people, she had an idea in her mind. She took out the cotton cloth brought back by Chun Dao and others yesterday and began to cut the cloth and make clothes. In those days, every woman must know some needlework because there were almost no ready-made clothes for sale. People could only buy cloth and go home to cut and make clothes themselves. As He Zulian was cutting cotton cloth, she sighed, Our lives are getting better and better. You do not say. Li Ping smiled and nodded. Ever since Dager woke up from his illness, life at home has changed dramatically. Not only can they have enough food to eat, but they can even eat meat every 2 or 3 days. Now, they even have new clothes. In the past, Li Ping would never have dared to imagine such a life. Ding Xiaohua on the side listened quietly to the conversation between the 2 with a smile on her face. Before fleeing Liangzhou, she never thought that she would live such a good life one day. Not only would she have enough to eat every day, but even her daughter Xiu Jie could wear new clothes. During this period of time, Ding Xiaohua felt like she was dreaming every day, and she was afraid that everything would be empty when she woke up. Fortunately, all this was not a dream. Ding Xiaohua was indeed lucky to meet Chen Dao. From a refugee who was about to starve to death, she has become one of the villagers of Qinjiao village today, and is the object of envy of all the villagers in Qinjiao village. After all, Ding Xiaohua is an outsider, but she can live in Chen Dao's house, eat steamed buns every day, and occasionally eat meat. It would be strange if the villagers were not envious. Pingmei, we are here. At this moment, there were shouts from outside the door, and Li Ping's 2 sisters-in-law came in with their children. Li Ping quickly put down the scissors in her hand, smiled, and said, Sister-in-law and sister-in-law, you are here? Here I come. Feng Xiang and Luo Xiu nodded in unison. They were both specially called over by Li Ping, but Li Ping did not tell them what the matter was. After seeing the cloth being cut, they probably understood. Pingmei, are you making new clothes? Luo Xiu asked while looking at the cotton cloth being worked on. Yes. Li Ping smiled and nodded. Hurry up and measure Li Cheng and Li Jin so I can sew clothes for them. Li Jin's eyes lit up when she heard this. In those days, due to the lack of food and clothing, most people wore old and even patched clothes. Li Jin was no exception. So when she heard that Li Ping was going to sew new clothes for her, she couldn't help but feel excited. Even Li Chung looked at the new cotton cloth with anticipation, his eyes shining. That won't do. Feng Xiaomong quickly refused. We can't have this dress. Feng Xiang's personality was simple after all. In her opinion, it was already too much for her to go to Qinjiao village every day to eat steamed buns, and it was somewhat unreasonable for her to accept Li Ping's new clothes. What's there to not want? Li Ping didn't care about that. She walked straight to Li Jin with a ruler and measured Li Jin's height, waist circumference, shoulder width, and other data. Li Jin felt a little embarrassed, but did not refuse. He just stood there and let Li Ping measure him. Feng Xiang and Luo Xiu looked at each other and knew they couldn't refuse, so they had to accept Li Ping's kindness. Soon, Li Jin and Li Chung finished measuring the data, and a group of women became busy in the house, cutting fabrics and sewing new clothes. Food, clothing, housing, and transportation are the 4 basic needs of human survival. The improvement of each of these 4 basic needs will bring people a great sense of happiness. What Li Ping and others are doing is undoubtedly to improve the quality of their own clothing. Therefore, when they are busy, everyone has a happy smile on their face. Even the children like Chun Fei, who were active by nature, had anticipation on their faces. They didn't even run out to play, but stayed in the house watching the adults making new clothes, and it seemed that they would never get tired of watching. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, 7 days have passed. That morning, the first thing Chun Dao did when he opened his eyes was to pull Xiao Yuan out of the quilt to check its progress. Blood Claw Red Panda. Features: fast speed, sharp claws, combat power comparable to a 6th grade warrior. Blood Claw Panda Advanced Route 1. Mating with a Fire Velvet Panda will produce a Flame Panda. The Flame Panda's characteristics: agile, able to breathe fire, and combat power comparable to a peak 6th grade warrior. Blood Claw Red Panda Advancement Route 2. Feed Fire Pattern Fruit for 10 consecutive days to advance to Fire Pattern Red Panda. Fire Panda features: its claws are hard and sharp, and its attacks are accompanied by the power of fire, which can burn enemies. Its combat power is comparable to that of item warriors. Advancement successful. Chen Dao stared at the advancement information that appeared in front of him, with a slight smile on his lips. After feeding blood bamboo shoots for 7 consecutive days, Xiao Yuan successfully advanced to become a blood-clawed red panda. However, Xiao Yuan's claws had turned dark red at this time, and looked a kind of weird beauty. Apart from its claws, there were not many changes in other parts of Xiao Yuan's body. It still looked silly and harmless. Even when Chun Dao pulled it out, it kept whimpering, as if it was angry that its owner had disturbed its sleep. It even broke free from Chun Dao's hand, stood up at the head of the bed, and waved its 2 front paws as if it wanted to beat Chen Dao. Chen Dao couldn't help but be touched by the cuteness of this little creature, so he directly hugged it and rubbed Xiao Yuan's head and soft fur frantically. Chapter 134, The First Force. After a moment, Chen Dao put Xiao Yuan down and began to think about Xiao Yuan's next step of advancement. Xiao Yuan is currently the undisputed number 1 force in Chen Dao's family, so Chen Dao is very concerned about its advancement. However, there is no need to consider the first of Xiao Yuan's 2 advancement routes. Chen Dao has not tried the advancement method through mating even once so far, because he simply cannot find another mating species. Therefore, the only advancement route Chen Dao can consider is the second one. Fire Pattern Fruit. What kind of medicinal herb is this? Chen Dao is no longer the rural boy who knew nothing about medicinal herbs. Chen Dao, who often goes to the city to buy medicine, has some understanding of medicinal herbs, but he has never heard of the name of the medicinal herb Fire Pattern Fruit. Moreover, the name of Fire Pattern Fruit doesn't sound like a medicinal herb at all. It seems I can only wait until next time I go to the city to ask. Chen Dao got up from the bed, walked out of the front yard, opened the door, and welcomed Chen Lian and the other 4, as well as Chun Cheng into the house. After signaling Chun Cheng to wait for him outside, Chen Dao led Chen Lian and the other 4 women directly to the backyard. Coo, coo, coo. Quack, quack, quack. As soon as you enter the backyard, you will hear the crowing of chickens and the quacking of ducks. After this period of breeding, the number of chickens in the backyard has exceeded 400, of which yellow-feathered chickens and yellow-feathered chicks account for the vast majority, blood-feathered chickens account for a small part, and there are also 4 blood-claw chickens and an iron-feathered chicken that has just successfully advanced. Iron-feathered chicken features tough wings, sharp claws, combat power comparable to that of a 7th grade warrior. Iron Feather Chicken Advanced Route 1. Mating with a steel-feathered chicken will hatch a steel-footed chicken. Features of the steel-footed chicken. Its wings and claws are as sharp as steel, and its combat power is comparable to that of a 6th-rank warrior. Iron Feather Chicken Advancement Route 2. Feed it with feather crown flowers for 10 consecutive days to advance to gold-winged chicken. Golden-winged chicken features. Can briefly float in the air. Its wings are resilient and extremely destructive, and its combat power is comparable to that of a 6th-rank warrior. Looking at the advancement information passing by in front of him, Chun Dao showed a relieved smile on his face. Without any accidents. After feeding Coxcomb for 7 consecutive days, the Bloodclaw chicken also advanced successfully and became an Iron Feather chicken with combat power comparable to that of a 7th-grade warrior. Only Chun Dao sighed helplessly. Coxcomb was too expensive after all, which caused the cost of raising Iron Feather chickens to remain high, making it impossible to breed them on a large scale. But even though there was only one Iron Feather chicken, Chun Dao was already very satisfied. Now, he had Siyuan, who was equivalent to a 6th-rank warrior, and the Iron Feathered chicken, who was equivalent to a 7th-rank warrior. His own safety could be said to be completely worry-free. And don't forget, Chun Dao not only has Xiaoyuan and Iron Feather chicken, but also 4 Bloodclaw chickens that are equivalent to 8th-grade warriors. In addition, there are Da Huang and Xiao Wang who have just successfully advanced. Chun Dao's eyes turned, and the advancement information of the 2 dogs appeared in his eyes. Guardian Dog. Characteristics. Loyal, strong sense of territory, combat power comparable to an 8th-grade warrior. The perfect choice for guarding the house. Mountain Dog Advancement Route 1. Mating with a Wind Wolf will produce a Swift Wind Dog. Features of the Swift Wind Dog. Swift as the wind, with a keen sense of smell, and combat power comparable to that of a 7th-grade warrior. It is the perfect choice for tracking and locating enemies. Mountain Guard Dog Advancement Route 2. Feed must for 10 consecutive days to advance to a Land Guard Dog. Features of a Territorial Dog. Strong sense of territory. Combat power comparable to a 7th-rank warrior, making it the perfect choice for guarding the home. Must. Looking at the medicinal material in the advanced information, Chun Dao couldn't help but frown slightly. In his previous life in China, he had heard of the medicinal material musk. This medicinal material is the dried secretion in the musk sac of mature male musk deer or musk deer of the musk family. It has many effects such as promoting blood circulation, dredge menstruation, reducing swelling, and relieving pain. However, Chun Dao felt that the musk in this advanced information was most likely different from the musk in his previous life, because Chun Dao had never heard of or seen musk in a pharmacy. Another medicinal herb I've never seen before. Chun Dao sighed inwardly. As the animals in his home advanced to higher levels, the medicinal herbs needed became more and more exotic. Why has this duck changed? But at this moment, Chun Lian behind Chun Dao let out a cry of surprise. Not only Chun Lian, but also Wu Yun and the other 4 women looked at the quacking ducks in the backyard in surprise. They saw that the ducks in the backyard, which originally had red and gray feathers, had changed drastically. They had become snow white and their bodies had become bigger. They looked like white swans. In addition, the careful Chun Lian also noticed that there were a dozen duck eggs on the ground. Chun Lian remembered clearly that the ducks they had been caring for had never laid eggs during this period of time. Now, not only had their appearance changed drastically, but they had also laid eggs. Chun Lian couldn't help but look at Chun Dao, knowing that this must have been done by Chun Dao. In fact, those who worked in Chun Dao's house all knew that Chun Dao had the secret to make livestock change, but they had never thought of digging into the matter. For her, and Wu Yun, and other women, Chun Dao could provide them with enough food to eat and gave them a salary of 1 or 2 taels of silver every month. This was enough. There was no need to know anything else. Characteristics of white-feathered ducks: large size, high meat production, and rapid reproduction. White-feathered duck Advanced Route 1. Mate with ruddy duck to hatch a white ruddy duck. Features of the white ruddy duck: its beak is strong, its feet are sharp, and its combat power is comparable to that of a 9th-grade warrior. White Feather Duck Advancement Route 2. Feed Gastrodia elata for 5 consecutive days to advance to Bloodheart Duck. Bloodheart Duck features: duck heart and duck blood can strengthen qi and blood, and the duck meat has a delicate texture and delicious taste. Looking at the white feather duck that had successfully advanced, Chun Dao had no intention of explaining to Chun Lian and the other 3. He simply instructed Chun Lian, Sister Lian, from now on, treat these ducks like the yellow-feathered chickens. Record the number of eggs they lay each day, and collect the eggs that failed to hatch. I understand. Chun Lian nodded in agreement and immediately said, Don't worry, Dower. I will definitely remember it for you. That'll do. Chun Dao nodded and immediately said with a smile, The money will be distributed in less than half a month. What will Sister Lian do with the money after she receives it? Upon hearing this, Chun Lian couldn't help but fall in a deep thought. Her family's land rent was given to Chun Dao, plus the income from working in Chun Dao's house. She could get at least 3 taels of silver this time. This amount of money was of course nothing to Chun Dao, but to Chun Lian it was no less than overwhelming wealth. With such a large sum of money, Chun Lian couldn't think of how to use it for a while, so she could only answer, I don't know how to spend so much money. Chun Dao couldn't help laughing. Wu Yun, who was standing beside them, said jokingly, Xiao Yin, if you don't know how to use it, why not save it and use it as a dowry in the future? Maybe you can find a caring and considerate husband who will understand your feelings. The other women burst into laughter, while Chun Lian's face turned red. After all, she was just a young girl, unlike those tough widows. It was inevitable that she felt shy when talking about the topic of marriage. That's a good idea too. Chun Dao smiled and said, But life doesn't have to be perfect until you get married. Sister Lian, you can think about it carefully and use this money to do something else. Chapter 135 Sprouting. Is marriage not necessary in life? Women like Wu Yin did not quite agree with this statement. People of their age had mostly established values, and it was difficult for them to be changed by a few words. For them, getting married and having children were necessary options in life. On the contrary, Chun Lian looked thoughtful, as if she was seriously considering what Chun Dao said. However, Chun Dao just said it casually. Soon Chun Dao turned around and went back to the house, leaving the backyard to Chun Lian and others. Outside Chun Dao's house, the villagers received steamed buns in an orderly manner. After receiving the steamed buns, they carried their farm tools and went to the fields to work with satisfied smiles on their faces. Chun Dao's family, who had just finished breakfast, were sitting in the kitchen eating breakfast. Of course, there were not only Chun Dao's family in the kitchen at this time, but also Ding Xiaohua, Chun Dao's family who came to help, 2 aunts and their children, and finally Chun Dao's personal bodyguard, Chun Sheng. Elder brother, Chun Fei, who was sitting next to Chun Dao, poked Chun Dao lightly with her index finger and said proudly, Look, I'm wearing new clothes. Hearing this, the adults sitting around the dining table all laughed. Children showing off is not disgusting, but rather very cute. In fact, it was not only Chun Fei who changed into new clothes. Chun Da's son, Chun Taidan, and the children from his 2 uncles' families also changed into new clothes. Everyone had a smile on their face. Brother saw it. Chun Dao smiled and touched Chun Fei's head. In fact, not only the children had new clothes, but the adults also had new clothes. However, because the adults needed to work and it was easy to get the new clothes dirty, they did not wear them out. Elder brother, Chun Fei looked at the food on the table with curiosity and asked, What is this? Today's breakfast is obviously different from the previous ones. In the past, it was either steamed buns or white rice, but today is noodles. Yes, noodles. Chun Dao was somewhat tired of eating steamed buns and white rice every day, so last night he taught Li Ping and others how to make noodles. Li Ping and others kneaded the dough according to Professor Chun Dao's method, then rolled the dough into a flat shape, and finally cut it into long noodles. Because it's handmade, the noodles in the bowl are a bit thick, but it looks pretty good. This is noodles. Chun Dao replied with a smile. He knew that noodles in this world were generally called soup cakes, but since he came from Earth, he still preferred to call them noodles. Noodle? Everyone secretly remembered the name. They had never eaten soup noodles. Since Chun Dao said it was noodles, it must be noodles. Chun Sheng picked up the bowl of noodles, took a sip of the soup in the bowl, and a look of surprise suddenly appeared on his face. The soup looks clear, but it tastes unexpectedly good. First, it is very salty, and secondly, there are some beaten eggs in the soup, which has a unique egg aroma. Chun Sheng picked up another piece of noodles with chopsticks and put it into his mouth. While chewing, his eyes narrowed slightly. The noodles also have an egg flavor, and the flavor is too obvious for someone like Chun Sheng, who doesn't eat meat for many years. Brother Chung, how does it taste? Li Ping asked with a smile. As the producer of egg noodles, she really wanted to know what Chun Sheng thought of egg noodles. It tastes great. Chen Sheng gave a thumbs up and said, Auntie's cooking skills are amazing. Hearing this, Li Ping's smile widened, and the others also smiled and began to taste the noodles. For Chen Dao, these noodles lacking seasoning and oil were barely edible, but others obviously did not think so. For everyone present, anything that could fill their stomachs would taste good. Not to mention, the egg noodles are made with eggs and plenty of salt, which is enough to satisfy them. These noodles taste really good, just as good as steam buns, but they don't make your mouth dry like steam buns do. Yes, after drinking this noodle soup, I feel warm all over. Me too. Just as everyone was enjoying noodles in the kitchen, outside Chen Dao's house, Chun He, who was supposed to be directing everyone's work in the fields, hurried to the door of Chen Dao's house and said, Brother Dao, there's good news. The village chief's voice? Hearing the sound, Chen Dao didn't think much and went straight to the front yard. He saw the village chief Chun He, who was over 50 years old, looking breathless, but his face was full of surprise. Brother Dao, the wheat in the field has sprouted, Chen He said immediately when he saw Chen Dao. Hearing this, Chen Dao was stunned for a moment. Then a look of joy appeared on his face. Sprouted? Hearing the noise, Chen Da and others also came out of the kitchen, with a look of surprise on their faces. In fact, Chen He was not the only one who was worried that the wheat he had planted would not grow. Even Chen Dao's family, Chen Da and others were extremely worried, fearing that the wheat would not grow and the efforts of the entire village would be wasted. Fortunately, the wheat has sprouted at this time. Yes, Chen He smiled broadly and said, I just saw some wheat sprouting in the fields, so I rushed back without stopping to tell Brother Dao this great news. For Chun He, the successful germination of wheat was indeed great news, because it means that crops have been successfully grown in the fields, and it also means, from now on, the villagers of Qinjia village can still continue to work for Chun Dao without worrying about running out of food at home. Brother Dao, let's go over and take a look, Li Ping said anxiously and was about to go and check it out immediately. Wait a minute. However, Chun Dao called Li Ping, went to the backyard to lead out Da Huang and Xiao Wang, and then walked quickly towards the farmland with everyone. In the fields belonging to Chunjia village, the villagers were not working in the fields, but standing by the fields, looking at the sparse green sprouts emerging from the fields from afar. There was no need to describe the surprise on their faces. Brother Dao didn't lie to us. We can really grow crops in this weather. Shungo looked at the tender green in the field with a face full of joy. The successful germination of wheat was undoubtedly a very pleasant surprise to him, because the field had grown crops, and he and his parents could continue to work for Chun Dao and continue to have steamed buns every day. That's great. We don't have to worry about Brother Dao not letting us work anymore. We can continue to eat steamed buns from now on. This wheat sprouted just in time. The villagers looked at the sparse, tender green sprouts in the field with shining eyes, as if they were looking at rare treasures. In fact, these wheat sprouts that have just sprouted are indeed no different from rare treasures. After all, most of the villagers are experienced farmers, and as experienced farmers, they know how precious these crops that can be grown during the cold winter are. Chapter 136. Back to the old business. Everyone make way. The village chief and Dao Gur are here. But at this moment a loud shout was heard and everyone turned around to look, only to see the village chief and Chun Dao walking side by side, followed by Chun Cheng, Chinda, Li Ping, and others. Brother Dao is here? Brother Dao, the wheat we planted has sprouted. Brother Dao, the wheat has grown. Everyone gathered around Chun Dao with smiles on their faces, and their words seemed to be asking for credit, as well as wanting Chun Dao to know the good news as soon as possible. Everyone, make way and don't block Brother Dao's way. Seeing that everyone was blocking Chun Dao's way, Chun Yi hurriedly signaled everyone to make way so that Chun Dao could walk to the edge of the field smoothly. Chun Dao stood at the edge of the field, looking at the green spots emerging from the originally barren land, and his heart was at peace. To be honest, before this, Chun Dao was a little nervous, not sure whether the cold-resistant wheat could really grow in such cold weather. Fortunately, my golden finger is still so powerful. The upgraded cold-resistant wheat can indeed germinate and grow in severe cold weather. Thank you all for your hard work. Chun Dao turned to look at the villagers and said, I've seen everyone's efforts. This batch of wheat can sprout, and everyone has contributed greatly. Hehe, Brother Dao speaks so nicely. Brother Dao, the work we do is nothing. Brother Dao, what are you talking about? You give us steamed buns to eat, and we work hard. Isn't that what we should do? The villagers were obviously very pleased with what Chen Dao said, and they all laughed. Chen Dao continued, I've never farmed before, so I don't know how to take care of this wheat. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you all to continue taking care of it in the future. But don't worry, folks. I, Chen Dao, will not give you less food than you deserve. Don't worry, Brother Dao. We will definitely take good care of your wheat. I'm not bragging. I've been farming for 20 years, and taking care of this wheat is like a piece of cake for me. Brother Dao, don't worry. We will definitely take good care of the wheat for you. Just wait for a good harvest. The villagers' enthusiasm was undoubtedly boosted when they saw the wheat sprout. Before the wheat sprouted, although they were willing to work because of the steamed buns provided by Chen Dao, they were still unsure and afraid that their efforts would be in vain. After seeing the wheat sprout, the villagers finally felt relieved. They were all very motivated and went into the fields to work. Some villagers are responsible for irrigation, some are responsible for fertilizing, and some are responsible for clearing weeds. The farmland looks well organized. Chen Dao stood by the field, looking at the green wheat sprouts and thinking. The successful planting of cold-resistant wheat means that the day of self-sufficiency in food is not far away. However, there's one thing Chen Dao still needs to be wary of. That is, will someone steal the wheat? Cold-resistant wheat that can grow in severe cold weather is undoubtedly a precious grain, and it is hard not to covet it. This is why Chen Dao specially brought Da Huang and Xiao Huang with him before going out. Both Da Huang and Xiao Huang have strong territorial awareness, so there will definitely be no problem in letting them be responsible for guarding the farmland. Thinking of this, Chen Dao squatted down and said to Da Huang and Xiao Huang, who were sticking out their tongues, Da Huang, Xiao Huang, I'll leave this farmland to you to guard, okay? Woof, woof, woof. Da Huang and Xiao Huang are quite smart. They obviously understood what Chen Dao said and responded to him with barks. Seeing this, Chen Dao immediately felt relieved, loosened the dog leash, and let Da Huang and Xiao Huang out. Woof, woof, woof. Big Yellow and Little Yellow ran happily around the edge of the field, like the owners of the farmland, patrolling around to see if anything was happening in the field. With Da Huang and Xiao Huang here, we don't have to worry about people stealing our wheat. Chen Dao narrowed his eyes and looked at Da Huang and Xiao Huang, who were patrolling around the farmland at a very fast speed, and he felt completely relieved. Da Huang and Xiao Huang are both mountain guard dogs equivalent to 8th grade warriors. If even they can't protect the cold-resistant wheat, then Chen Dao has no other choice. When Chen Dao stood up, he suddenly saw Li Zheng standing not far from him. He seemed to remember something and hurriedly called out to Li Zheng, Mr. Li, please stay. Li Zheng, who had rolled up his sleeves and trouser legs and was about to go into the fields to work, suddenly turned around and said, Brother Dao, what's going on? Although Li Zheng is a scholar, he does not have the arrogance of a scholar. During this period, he worked in the fields with the villagers every day, and he became much darker and thinner. I need your help with something. Chen Dao pondered for a moment and said, I would like to invite Mr. Li to resume his old job. Back to your old job? Li Zheng was puzzled. His old job was to teach the children in the village to read, but this was simply impossible. Even in peaceful years, there are very few families in the village who can afford to send their children to school, let alone in these times when people can't even get enough to eat. Even Li Zheng couldn't even afford paper now. As for the pen, without ink or paper, the pen was just a decoration. Yes. Chen Dao nodded seriously and said, I plan to hire you, Mr. Li, as the village teacher to teach the children literacy and arithmetic. The meaning of this statement is very simple. That is, Chen Dao is preparing to reopen the village school, and his purpose in reopening the school is also very simple. It is not for the purpose of taking the imperial examinations, nor for understanding the profound meaning of the saints, but just to let the children in the village understand arithmetic and literacy. As Chen Dao's family has more and more chickens and ducks and produces their own food, Qinjiao village will have more and more commercial exchanges with the outside world. At that time, the importance of people who know arithmetic and literacy will become prominent. It's a very simple truth. If you do business with others and you don't even understand arithmetic, aren't you just waiting to be ripped off? Only literacy and arithmetic. Li Zheng asked in surprise. For scholars in Xia country, the purpose of studying was almost only one, that is, to pass the imperial examinations. And when passing the imperial examinations, arithmetic accounted for a very low proportion. Li Zheng did not understand why Chen Dao attached so much importance to arithmetic. Right, Chen Dao nodded. Mr. Li doesn't need to teach them too many profound principles. He just needs to teach them some common characters and arithmetic. After saying that, Chen Dao added, "Of course, I won't let you do this job for free, Mr. Li. You'll be paid." Having said this, Chen Dao paused for a moment, then continued, "This salary will be temporarily set at 1 tael of silver. What do you think, Mr. Li?" Chapter 137. Be polite. I'm Fine. For Li Zheng, teaching was definitely easier than doing farm work, so he had no reason to refuse except. Li Zheng thought for a moment, frowned, and said, "Brother Dao, the cost of supporting children in the village to go to school is not small. Are you sure you want to do this? These days, it is not an easy task to support children's education. The cost of pens, ink, paper, and inkstone is not small." Li Zheng is a little worried whether Chen Dao can afford it. "Don't worry about that," Chen Dao said disapprovingly. "Mr. Li can go back and clean up the school now. He will officially start teaching the children in 3 days." I see. Although Li Zheng still had some doubts, he nodded in agreement. At the same time, opposite the farmland of Qinjia village, Li Chong and Li Mu stood by the fields of Xiaohe village. Looking at the villagers of Qinjia village busy in the farmland from afar, their expressions shocked. Although the distance was a bit far, Li Chong and Li Mu had very good eyesight and could vaguely see some green spots emerging in the fields. They knew very well what this meant. "This Qinjia village actually grows crops?" Li Mu said in disbelief. It was so cold that no crops could be grown in the entire Qingzhou area. This was a fact recognized by all the people in Qingzhou. Yet at this time, Qinjia village had planted crops and successfully sprouted. How could Li Mu not be shocked by this? He even had a wild imagination and wondered whether the villagers of Qinjia village had seen an immortal and obtained from him some magical food that could grow in severe cold weather. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain the scene he saw before his eyes. This is fucking bullshit. Li Mu was shocked, and so was Li Chong. He had previously laughed at the villagers of Qinjia village, thinking that they were daydreaming of growing crops in such weather. He never expected that the clown would be himself. The villagers of Qinjia village are not just imagining things. They can actually grow crops in freezing weather. "Father," Li Mu suddenly turned to look at Li Chong, his eyes burning with passion. "Qinjia village's land can grow food. Can our village's land also grow food?" The land of Qinjia village is connected to that of Xiaohe village, and the soil is the same. Since the land of Qinjia village can grow crops, there is no reason why the land of Xiaohe village cannot. As long as we can get grain seeds from Qinjia village, then Xiaohe village can also grow grain and won't have to go hungry anymore. Let's go ask Chunhe. Li Chong thought about it and led Li Mu across the farmland to look for Chunhe. Woof, woof, woof. But at this moment, 2 huge dogs appeared in front of them, looking at them vigilantly, lowering their bodies slightly, baring their teeth, and assuming an attacking posture. The big dogs that stopped the 2 men were naturally Da Huang and Huang, who had just been released by Chen Dao. For dogs, they recognize people mainly through smell and, secondly, through eyes. The villagers of Qinjia village will not be attacked as long as they do not steal wheat or destroy wheat fields because Da Huang and Huang have remembered their smell. Li Chong and Li Mu were naturally stopped by Da Huang and Huang because they were unfamiliar with the smell. What a big dog! Li Mu stared at the 2 dogs in front of him with wide eyes and couldn't help but wonder if he was dazzled because these 2 dogs were so big that they didn't look like dogs but more like some kind of ferocious beasts. Even when they're on all fours, Da Huang and Huang are over 80 centimeters tall. When they bare their teeth, you can see their long fangs in their mouths, which looks quite scary. Woof, woof, woof. Da Huang and Huang made warning sounds, signaling the 2 to leave. But it was obvious that Li Mu and Li Chong did not understand what they meant, so they wanted to walk around Da Huang and Huang. Seeing this, Da Huang and Huang became angry and were about to attack immediately. Wait! But at this moment, Chunhe noticed the commotion and ran over quickly, stopping Da Huang and Huang. Da Huang, Huang. Don't do it! When Chen Dao left just now, he had specifically explained the situation of Da Huang and Huang to Chunhe, so Chunhe knew the responsibilities of Da Huang and Huang. After seeing Da Huang and Huang stopping Li Chong and Li Mu, he hurried over to stop them. Fortunately, he arrived in time, Otherwise, Li Chong and Li Mu would have been seriously injured if not killed. Village Chief Chun, you're here. Li Chong, who was almost attacked by Da Huang and Huang, breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't take the two dogs seriously before, until the moment the two dogs launched the attack. He truly felt the oppression of the two dogs. At that moment, Li Chong almost thought he was going to die. Fortunately, Chun-He arrived in time and stopped the two dogs that were about to attack him. Village Chief Chun, why do you still keep such a vicious dog in your village? Li Mu asked with lingering fear. The moment Da Huang and Huang launched the attack, their momentum was really scary. Even a strong young man like him felt a full sense of oppression. This isn't our village's dog. It's raised by Dao Gur. Chun-He said, next time you see this dog, be polite to it, or else it will be bitten to death and your death will be in vain. Is it that powerful? Li Mu asked, somewhat unconvinced. Although he was frightened just now, he was still somewhat unconvinced. He felt that these two dogs were sneak attacking without following martial ethics, which was why he was frightened. If he was on full alert, he would definitely not be afraid of these two dogs. Don't disbelieve it. Chun-He shook his head and said, the animals Dao Gur raises are no ordinary animals. They can actually kill people. You know the bandits who often appear along the official road from our village to the county town? No. Li Chong and the other man nodded. The so-called forest bandits refer to a specific group of thieves who specifically hide on both sides of the official road and make a living by robbing caravans and passersby. These thieves may not be very strong in combat, but they can always rely on their numerical advantage to plunder the wealth of traveling merchants and passersby, and are extremely disgusting. A while ago, when Dao Gur and his companions were returning from the county town, they encountered a group of forest bandits. Guess what happened? Chun-He asked mysteriously. Li Chong and Li Mu looked at each other. Judging from the fact that Chun Dao was still alive and well, Chun Dao must have escaped unscathed. But how did he escape unscathed? Although those forest bandits were not strong in combat, they were numerous and had weapons in their hands, so they were not easy to deal with. Chun Dao was just a young boy. How could he escape from a siege of the forest bandits? Did brother Dao pay the bandit Lin? Li Mu asked curiously. He heard that some forest bandits would not kill all pedestrians and merchants, but would let them go after collecting some money. Chun Dao was not short of money, so Li Mu guessed that Chun Dao was very likely to have paid money to the forest bandits, which was how he was able to escape unscathed. Chapter 138, Reassuring. Li Chong nodded subconsciously, indicating that he agreed with Li Mu's statement. He also felt that Chun Dao was most likely to have paid money to escape from the hands of the bandit Lin. Wrong. Chun-He simply shook his head, denying this answer. How could brother Dao possibly give money to those abominable bandits? If he didn't give me the money, how did he get away with it? Li Mu couldn't help but ask. The bandits have always been numerous and powerful. If Chun Dao and others fought with the bandits, even if they could successfully defeat them, there would definitely be casualties on their side. But during this period of time, there was no news of anyone dying in Xinjia village. Of course, we'll kill all the bandits. Chun-He's tone seemed to carry a hint of coldness. According to the villagers who traveled with Dao Gur, there were 11 bandits in that group, all armed with swords, guns, sticks, and other weapons. But Dao Gur showed no fear and killed all of them. How is that possible? Li Mu cried out in surprise. Chun Dao and the villagers who were traveling with him were just ordinary farmers. How could they fight against the armed bandits and even kill them all? That's the truth. Chun-He continued. That group of forest bandits was indeed killed by Dao Gur and his men. And the reason they were able to kill that group of forest bandits without any injuries was because of the cat that Dao Gur often had hanging on his shoulder. Cat? Li Mu and Li Chong were stunned, recalling the last time they saw Chun Dao. At that time, Chun Dao indeed had a harmless-looking cat-like animal hanging on his shoulder. According to Chun Si and others who were traveling with Dao, Chun-He said in a low voice, Dao Gur's cat moves as fast as a ghost, and its claws are extremely sharp. Whenever it strikes, it can definitely cut the throat of a bandit. 11 bandits were killed by Dao Gunner's cat in just a few breaths. This. Li Chong and Li Mu stared at each other in surprise and couldn't help but gasp. In just a few breaths, they killed dozens of forest bandits. How could the little cat on Dao Gur's shoulder be so ferocious? Chun-He took in the two people's reactions and asked, Now, do you still think these two dogs are ordinary dogs? Hearing this, Li Chong and the other man shook their heads like rattles. Are you kidding? The little cat raised by Chun Dao can kill dozens of forest bandits in an instant, not to mention a dog of such a huge size. At this time, the two of them couldn't help but show some fear in their eyes when looking at Da Huang and Xiao Wang. They even subconsciously moved their feet away from Da Huang and Xiao Wang for fear of being attacked by Da Huang and Xiao Wang again. Big Yellow and Little Yellow have memorized your taste. Chun Yi patted Da Huang's head and said with a smile, "You can enter the farmland of our village smoothly from now on, but don't try to steal anything from the fields, otherwise you will be bitten to death by Da Huang and Xiao Huang, and that would be a waste of your life." Li Chong and Li Mu nodded like chicks pecking at rice. In fact, they had not thought about stealing anything. They just wanted to discuss with Chun Yi and get the grain seeds in a legitimate way. Village Chief Chun. Li Chong smiled flatteringly and said, "Do you have any extra grain in Xinjia village? Could you sell us some?" "No." Chun Yi shook his head and said, "These grain seeds are given to us by Dao Ger. Now all the grain seeds have been planted. There is no surplus." Regardless of whether there are extra grain seeds or not, even if there are, Chun He would not be so generous to give it to others, and he would not make the decision without authorization without going through Chun Dao. After all, under Chun Dao's instruction, Chun Cheng, the personal bodyguard, had spread the news of his cheerful conversation with the county magistrate throughout the village. Now Chun Dao's prestige in the village far surpassed that of the village chief, and his words were far more effective than his. In this situation, if Chun He dared to give the precious cold-resistant wheat to others without authorization, the villagers would not forgive him even if Chun Dao did not have to do anything. "Is that so?" A look of disappointment appeared on Li Chong's face, but he knew that he couldn't force it, so he could only continue chatting with Chun He and learn as much information as possible about the grain varieties. As the sun gradually moved westward, the villagers reluctantly walked out of the fields and headed towards Xinjia village. "The green shoots in this field are so reassuring to look at," an old-looking villager said. The others also nodded. "That's right. The fact that crops can grow in the fields is a great joy for us. I don't know where Brother Dao found these seeds. They can actually sprout in such cold weather. Brother Dao is a capable man. It's no surprise that he can find such a magical grain. Now that food is growing in this land, we won't have to worry about going hungry in the future. The grain in this field belongs to Brother Daoer. You don't think it's yours, do you? Of course I know it's Dao Gur's family, but Dao Gur will definitely not let us go hungry." The villagers walked towards Chunjia village, talking and laughing. The smiles on their faces seemed to turn into hope under the sunset. For the villagers of Chunjia village, even if the food in the fields does not belong to them, it is indeed a very happy thing to see food growing in the fields. After all, it means that Xinjia village can achieve self-sufficiency in food in the future and no longer needs to go to the city to buy expensive food, nor do they need to eat bran every meal. Not long after, the villagers arrived at Chun Dao's house one after another and saw Li Zheng, Chun Sheng, and Chun Dao standing outside the door waiting. "Brother Dao and Mr. Li, are they waiting for us?" The villagers looked at the two people waiting outside the door in confusion. In the past, Chun Dao seldom waited outside the door for the villagers returning from work. Most of the time, it was Chun Da or Chun Sheng who distributed steam buns to everyone. Chun Dao usually hid in the house or in the backyard. But today he appeared outside the door, which was unusual. This meant that Chun Dao must have something to tell everyone. As expected, after most of the villagers had gathered outside Chun Dao's house, Chun Dao stepped forward and said to the crowd, "Everyone, please be quiet. I have something to tell you." As soon as Chun Dao spoke, everyone immediately quieted down, looking at him, waiting for him to speak. "I plan to reopen the village school." Chun Dao said in a clear voice, "From now on, Mr. Li will be our village's teacher, specializing in teaching our children to read and write. Every child under the age of 18 in the village can go to the school." After saying that, Chun Dao added, "This study is completely free. The school will also provide writing brushes, ink, paper, and other tools. You don't need to pay a penny." Chapter 139, Profit-Driven. After listening to Chun Dao's speech, the villagers looked at each other in surprise. The village school was a very distant thing in everyone's memory. In fact, many people had forgotten that there was a school in the village. After all, for the villagers of Chunjia village, farming is the most important thing, and studying has no meaning to them. After all, even if they could read and write, it was impossible for them to pass the imperial examinations. In short, There was no benefit to the villagers from studying. Why? Why is Brother Dao suddenly planning to open a school? It's good to be able to read for free, but there's no use in reading this book, is there? I heard that scholars can take the imperial examinations. How exactly do you get that? How would I know? The villagers frowned and thought. They had no idea why Qin Dao wanted to set up a school. In their opinion, it was far more useful for children to help the family farm than to study. Qin's eyes lit up. He was a far-sighted village chief. It was he who decided to build the school in Li Zheng's family. However, due to the poverty of Chenjia village, the school was eventually shelved. Now Qin Dao plans to reopen the school, which is very much in line with Chun He's idea. Everyone must be curious about why I want to run a school. Qin Dao didn't seem surprised by everyone's reaction and continued. My purpose in setting up the school is simple. I need people who can read and do math to help me with my work. From now on, when it comes to jobs at my house, I will give priority to literate villagers. As soon as Chun Dao said this, many villagers were immediately tempted. Helping Chun Dao with work was the thing that the whole village was looking forward to the most. Just look at the treatment Chun Dao gave to Chun Lian and others. Not only could they have enough to eat every day, but they also received a salary of 1 or 2 taels of silver a month. For the poor villagers of Chenjia village, this kind of treatment was simply a dream job. Therefore, when they heard that Chun Dao would give priority to those who could read and write, many villagers began to think about sending their children to school. The reason why they think studying is useless is simply because they cannot see the benefits of studying. But now that the benefits of studying are obvious, why should they resist? Not to mention, studying in school is free. I'll send my children to school as soon as I get home. Me too. If that stupid boy of mine doesn't study well, I'll beat him to death. Fortunately, my child is not yet 18 years old and can go to school. The villagers were all interested. At this time, Chun Lian, who had just walked to the door of Chun Dao's house, suddenly asked, "Brother Dao, can I go to school too?" After hearing what Chun Dao said just now, Chun Lian couldn't help but worry about her job of raising chickens. Chun Dao said that in the future, his family would give priority to literate people for jobs. If she was illiterate, it would be difficult for her to keep her lucrative job of raising chickens. Therefore, Chun Lian urgently wanted to get the opportunity to study and keep her job. Chun Dao turned his head and glanced at Chun Lian, frowning slightly. The reason why he set the school age at under 18 was because children are more malleable, have stronger learning abilities, and are more likely to learn to read quickly. Chun Lian is already 18 years old. In the Xia Kingdom, where children can get married at the age of 14 or 15, she is already an adult, and her plasticity is far less than that of a child. However, Chun Dao has no reason to refuse those who want to study. Can. Chun Dao nodded at Chun Lian and said, regardless of gender or age, anyone who wants to learn to read and write can go to the school to study. However, they must do their work well first. Now, Chun Lian also takes on the job of raising chickens. It is obvious that Chun Lian cannot leave this job for a while, so Chun Dao must take precautions in advance and cannot let Chun Lian delay raising chickens and ducks because of going to school. After all, raising chickens and ducks is the source of Chun Dao's wealth, and we can't give up because of fear. Don't worry, Brother Dao, I understand. Chun Lian nodded. She did not intend to give up her job of raising chickens. After all, her family's financial situation did not allow it. She just wanted to go to school to learn when she had free time. Both boys and girls can go to school? Then can my daughter go to school too? After she learns to read, can she work for Dao Guer like Chun Lian and the others? Can this girl really study? I've never heard of a girl studying. Why can't a girl do that? Aren't Chun Lian and the others working well at Dao Guer's house? That's right. We women can work, so why can't we study? The situation in Xia State was very similar to that in ancient China, both of which had the custom of favoring boys over girls. But when Qin Dao said that both men and women could go to school, the villagers of Qinjia village quietly began to pay more attention to girls and their families. After all, if you go to school and learn to read, you can work for Qin Dao, and by working for Qin Dao, you can earn at least 1 or 2 taels of silver every month. This income is already a super high salary for the villagers of Qinjia village, and it is hard not to make the villagers pay attention to it. All right, Qin Dao concluded his speech and said, the school will officially open in 3 days. Families with children can send them to the school. Adults who want to learn to read can also attend the school as auditors. After saying that, Qin Dao walked into the house on his own, leaving a group of villagers in deep thought. I've decided to send my daughter to school in 3 days. Me too. If you read this book, you can work for Brother Dao. Only a fool would not read it. When I have time, I'll go ask Mr. Lee for advice so I can learn more words. That way, Brother Dao might give me priority when hiring him for a job in the future. You're quite clever. Li Zheng looked at the villagers with positive expressions and couldn't help but smile with relief. When the school was first built, most villagers were very resistant to sending their children to study. After all, boys were also part of the labor force in Qinjia village. If the villagers sent their children to school, they would not only lose a labor force, but also have to buy pens, ink, paper, and inkstone at their own expense. The villagers are naturally unhappy because they spend a lot of money but see no benefits. And now, driven by the benefits Chen Dao promised, the villagers' desire to send their children to school has become stronger, and even many adults who can't read a single word are planning to attend the school as auditors. Li Zheng also saw many villagers hurried back home after receiving the steam buns. If nothing unexpected happened, they should have gone back to arrange their children's schooling. Chapter 140. Wang Heihu. Mr. Chen's home. Chen Sheng, Chen Go, and Lu Jie, who had eaten steam buns at Chen Dao's house, were each sitting on a chair, discussing sending Chen Sheng to school. Brother Go, do you want to go to school? Mr. Chen looked at Chen Go, who had a thoughtful look on his face, and asked. He naturally wanted to send Chen Go to school, because the benefits of reading and writing are visible to the naked eye, but Mr. Chen had no idea of forcing Chen Go. He knew very well that his son was a man with his own ideas, and forcing him would only backfire. Of course I'll go, Chen Go said without hesitation. I don't want to dig for food in the fields like you, Dad, for the rest of my life. I want to study and work with Brother Dao. Chen Go has always regarded Chen Dao as his idol. Therefore, when he heard Chen Dao say that literate villagers could work for Chen Dao first, Chen Go became determined to study, not for anything else, just to get a job from Chen Dao. Chen Go had recently inquired about the work of Chen Lian and other women. He knew very well that Chen Lian and others' work was not tiring, but they could eat steamed buns every day and receive a salary of 1 or 2 taels of silver after a month. That was 1 tael of silver. Chen Go had lived for more than 10 years and had never seen a complete 1 tael of silver. Chen Sheng and Lu Jie both laughed when they heard Chen Go's answer. They were afraid that Chen Go would not want to study. Fortunately, Chen Go was a smart child and knew the benefits of reading and writing. As for what Chen Go said about digging for food in the ground, a term that seemed somewhat derogatory to earthlings, neither of them paid any attention to it. After all, in the Xia kingdom, digging for food in the fields is not a derogatory term. Conversations similar to the one in Chen Go's family were happening in almost every home in Qinjia village with children. Every villager with children had made a decision to send their children to school in 3 days. A bright moon hangs high above. Qinjia village gradually fell into darkness and silence, but in a house in the county town, candles were still lit. Wang Heihu of the Black Tiger Gang lay on the bed, allowing the beautiful woman beside him to serve him with all her skills. After a while, Wang Heihu let out a breath, and a look of satisfaction flashed across his face. His concubine's skills were indeed extraordinary, and she always made him feel reluctant to leave. Wang Heihu, the leader of the Black Tiger Gang and an 8th-rank warrior, has never had a wife. This may sound a bit ridiculous, but it is indeed a true fact. The reason for this situation is, when marrying a wife in the Xia kingdom, the emphasis is on matching the family background. Wang Heihu's identity meant that he could not marry a woman from a commoner family, so he could only choose one from a wealthy and powerful family. But problems also followed. In the eyes of the bigwigs in the county, the Black Tiger Gang was just a force that was not worthy of being on the stage, no different from a stinky rat in the gutter. Those wealthy families naturally would not look down on Wang Heihu, let alone marry their daughters to him. As for the concubine's daughter, there is no way Wang Heihu would marry her. This led to the current situation, where the position of Wang Heihu's wife has remained vacant. However, although he had no wife, Wang Heihu had many concubines, and the one he loved most was the concubine named Qin Yuan. Although the status of concubines in Xia State is similar to that of cattle and horses, some concubines who are loved by their masters are treated relatively well. Take Qin Yuan, for example. Although she is just a concubine, she is almost the same as the wife in Wang Heihu's family and is deeply respected by the servants in the house. Master. After serving Wang Heihu, Qin Yuan stretched out her white arms and hugged Wang Heihu, breathing sweetly and saying, "I haven't heard from my brother for several days. I wonder if the master has heard anything about him." Qin Yuan's younger brother was none other than Qin Jiang, who had previously attempted to rob Chun Dao and was killed by Chun Dao outside the city. The reason why Qin Jiang was able to hold such a high position in the Black Tiger Gang was because he had a sister with outstanding skills. Otherwise, at Qin Jiang's age and not being a warrior, it is impossible for him to command dozens of gang members in the Black Tiger Gang. Wang Heihu's eyes flickered when he heard Qin Yuan's question. He had already found out about Qin Jiang's news. His brother-in-law had died outside the city a long time ago, but he did not intend to pursue the matter. Because he only liked Qin Yuan's skills, but he didn't like Qin Yuan's stupid brother, who was as stupid as a pig. Qin Jiang relied on his status as Wang Heihu's brother-in-law to cause countless troubles in the Black Tiger Gang, and every time he asked Wang Heihu to help clean up the mess, which made many old people in the gang complain about him. Therefore, Wang Heihu had long since disliked Qin Jiang, and Qin Jiang's death would only benefit him and not harm him. However, although Wang Heihu secretly cheered for Qin Jiang's death, he still felt sad about the gang members who died with him. Dozens of gang members died, and this loss was enough to make Wang Heihu feel painful. Even though the Black Tiger Gang has a large number of members, they cannot afford to suffer such losses. Wang Heihu couldn't help but grit his teeth and thought to himself, "Don't let me know who did it. Otherwise he will be in trouble." No news yet. Wang Heihu, who was furious, smiled and replied to Qin Yuan, "I've already sent someone to investigate. Madam, please don't worry." In order to please Qin Yuan, Wang Heihu always called Qin Yuan Madam, so that Qin Yuan would use all her strength to serve him. But Wang Heihu knew very well in his heart that he had always treated Qin Yuan as a concubine, like a plaything, and had never regarded Qin Yuan as his wife. "How can I not be anxious?" Qin Yuan's tears suddenly fell. As she wiped them away, she said, "My parents died early, and I have been dependent on my brother since I was a child. Now that I have no news of my brother, how can I not be anxious?" "Don't cry, don't cry." Wang Heihu quickly hugged Qin Yuan and comforted her. "Good luck to you, little brother. I'm sure you'll be fine. Maybe you'll be back in a few days." "Return? That's impossible." Wang Heihu knew in his heart that Qin Jiang had long since become a wandering ghost, and he had even sent people to bury his body. He said this only to appease Qin Yuan. After all, it was really annoying when this woman cried, and Wang Heihu was attracted by Qin Yuan's skills and couldn't leave her for a while. "Master, you promised me that you would do your best to find my whereabouts." Qin Yuan's beautiful eyes, filled with tears, stared into Wang Heihu's eyes. Wang Heihu quickly put on a righteous attitude and said, "Madam, don't worry, I will do my best. I have already sent all the brothers in the gang to look for me. I believe there will be news soon. Madam, you can rest assured." Hearing this, Qin Yuan felt relieved immediately, but she did not rush to sleep. Instead, she continued to serve Wang Heihu. As for how to serve him, the audience can only imagine it on their own. Chapter 141, Big Shots. Wuhan never thought that he, a low-level peddler, would actually meet, or rather, travel with such a big shot. Yes, there were 4 strangers in Wuhan's caravan today. 2 of them were Chun Dao's uncles, and as for the other 2, although both of them were dressed very casually, if you looked carefully, you could find that the middle-aged man with a beard had a particularly unique temperament. The middle-aged man was none other than Su Jiwen, the county magistrate of Taiping County. Wuhan never imagined that one day he would travel with a county magistrate. You have to know that Wuhan was just an ordinary peddler. Normally, he could only come into contact with minor officials in the government. How could he have ever come into contact with a high-ranking official like a county magistrate? As for the reason why Su Jiwen appeared in Wuhan's caravan, this matter probably started 3 days ago. 3 days ago, when the wheat planted in Chunjia village sprouted, Zhang He and Su Jiwen's master, He Jian, also walked into Su Jiwen's home and presented him with the information they had collected about Chun rice. That's all. Su Jiwen took the information and glanced at it, and suddenly exclaimed in surprise. After several days, the 2 of them had only collected 4 pieces of information about Chun Dao. 1. Chun Dao was indeed born in Chunjia village. His father passed away several years ago. He has a younger sister, and the brother and sister depend on their mother Li Ping for survival. 2. Chun Dao has been going to the city frequently recently, mostly to buy food, herbs, salt, and other daily necessities. 3. Chun Dao had close ties with the Fuhu boxing gym, and was also good friend with a peddler in the city named Wuhan. 4. Every time Chun Dao went to the city, he would go to a shop called Bai Keitang. Of these 4 pieces of information, the first one was found by He Jian and Zhang, he from the household registration information at the county government office, and the last 3 were obtained by asking others in the market. It was obvious that Su Jiwen was not satisfied with the information the two had collected about Chun Dao. What he wanted to know was why Chun Dao had a pet like Xiao Yuan that looked like a monster, what secrets Chun Dao had, and why he had a magical chicken breed like the blood feather chicken, rather than these superficial news. Return to the county master. He Jian clasped his fists and said, "You said before that we shouldn't conduct investigations in a way that would disturb Chun Dao. Therefore, we can't go to Qinjia village to investigate. We can only learn about Chun Dao from people in the county who have had contact with him. Naturally, the information we can obtain is very limited. The best way to investigate a person is of course to go to his place of residence to investigate, but going to Qinjia village to investigate will undoubtedly alarm Chun Dao, which is contrary to the requirements of the county magistrate. Therefore, this is all the information He Jian and Zhang he can learn about Chun Dao." All right. Su Jiwen also knew that what the two had found out was already the limit, so he did not continue to question them. Instead, he said thoughtfully, "Who is this Wuhan? Where's Bai Keitang?" Bai Keitang is a medicine shop near the North City Gate. It's run by a grandfather and his daughter, and all the herbs they sell are common. He Jian recalled for a moment and said, "As for Wuhan, he used to be a peddler selling livestock in the East Market, but he has not been selling goods there recently." Oh, Su Jiwen's eyes flashed with a gleam of light. "A peddler doesn't sell goods? We are not selling goods in the East Market." He Jian corrected him. "According to the information we've found, Wuhan has been traveling frequently between Qinjia village and the Fuhu boxing gym recently. Every time he leaves the city for Qinjia village, he brings back large quantities of grain, salt, and other goods. Upon his return, he also brings back a large number of livestock to sell to the Fuhu boxing gym. It said that the profits are very lucrative." It was obvious that Wuhan's frequent visits to Qinjia village could not be concealed from those who were interested. After all, Wuhan was always followed by a truck and a large number of guards whenever he entered or left the city. He Jian only needed to ask the refugees outside the city and the residents near the North Gate to easily know the details of Wuhan's entry and exit of the city. "I see." Su Jiwen suddenly realized something, and then a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. This peddler named Wuhan was obviously the best channel to understand Chun Dao. After thinking for a moment, Su Jiwen said to Zhang He, "Go and invite Wuhan over." Yes. Zhang He clasped his fists and quickly came to Wuhan's house. When he saw Wuhan, he said, "Wuhan, the county magistrate wants to see you. Come with me." Wuhan was like being struck by lightning and felt extremely confused. The villagers outside the city might not be able to react to the word county magistrate for a while, but Wuhan, who lives in the city, is very familiar with this word because this word represents the highest official in Taiping County, the county magistrate. "The county magistrate wants to see me?" Wuhan couldn't help but recount his recent actions. He found that he hadn't violated any law. He then recounted his childhood experiences. Aside from climbing over a wall to watch the woman next door bathe out of curiosity, he hadn't done anything particularly sinful. "I haven't done anything wrong. Why does the county magistrate want to see me?" Wuhan was completely confused. He was expected to greet even the lowest level clerks in the government with a smile, so he had no idea why a big shot like the county magistrate wanted to see him. This strong man. Wuhan hesitated for a moment, then addressed Zhang. "He is a brave warrior. May I ask why you, the county lord, would like to see me?" "You'll find out when you get there," Zhang He said with a smile. His attitude towards Wuhan was still very good. Seeing this, Wuhan couldn't help but feel relieved. The messenger who came to inform him was so kind, which meant the county magistrate wanted to see him, which might not be a bad thing. No matter what, the county magistrate wanted to see him, which was not something Wuhan could refuse, so after saying goodbye to his wife, he followed Zhang He to Su Jiwen's house. Su Jiwen's house was not big, at least much smaller than the Zhu family's house. As Zhang He walked through the gate and came to the living room, Wuhan recognized the county magistrate sitting in the main seat at first sight. Of course, this was not because Wuhan knew Su Jiwen, but because he recognized the official uniform on him. When Zhang he went to Wuhan's house, Su Jiwen had already changed into a green official uniform embroidered with flying birds, which made him look majestic. "Are you Wuhan?" Su Jiwen looked at Wuhan, who was brought by Zhang He, and asked in a calm tone. But Wuhan felt extremely pressured. Just as the vast majority of the people in China cannot see the mayor of their city, the vast majority of the common people in Xia cannot see officials like the county magistrate. The only people they can meet are the petty clerks in the county government office. Therefore, when facing Su Jiwen, Wuhan was inevitably a little nervous and replied stiffly, "Your Excellency, I am Wuhan." Chapter 142, Chunjia Village in the Mist. No need to be nervous. Su Jiwen, sensing Wuhan's nervousness, soothed him. "I called you here to ask you something. I won't harm you." Upon hearing this, Wuhan felt relieved. If a big shot like the county magistrate said he would not harm him, then he definitely would not harm him. This made Wuhan feel a lot more at ease. "My name is Su Jiwen. You may call me County Magistrate Su." Su Jiwen continued. "The reason I called you here is because I want to get some news about Chundao from you." Old rice. Wuhan was stunned and couldn't help muttering to himself. What did Brother Chen do wrong that the county magistrate actually came to investigate in person? Su Jiwen naturally didn't know what Wuhan was thinking, so he just continued. "I heard that you have some connection with Chunjia Village." Facing Su Jiwen, Wuhan did not dare to hide anything and told the truth. "There are indeed some connections. I mainly do some business with Chunjia Village to earn some money." Su Jiwen nodded and asked, "Do you know much about Chunjia Village?" "I have some understanding. In your opinion, is there anything special about Chunjia Village?" "What's so special about it?" Wuhan frowned and said, "There's nothing special about Chunjia Village. If I had to say anything, it's because it's adjacent to Kangmang Mountain, so there are more mountain products." "What about Chundao?" Su Jiwen looked directly into Wuhan's eyes and asked, "What makes Chundao different from ordinary people?" Wuhan's heart trembled when he noticed Su Jiwen's gaze, and he immediately gave up the idea of covering up for Chundao. Chundao is extremely mysterious. Not only can he capture a large number of magical chicken breeds, but he also has a close relationship with the owner of the Fuhu boxing gym. In addition, Chundao is also very generous. The villagers of the entire Chunjia village now rely on Chundao for their livelihood. "I'm sorry, Brother Chun." Wuhan kept apologizing in his heart. He wanted to hide something for Chundao, but facing Su Jiwen's scrutinizing gaze, he really didn't have the courage. "Depending on old rice, for a living?" He Jian suddenly said, "What do you mean?" Zhang He and Su Jiwen also looked at Wuhan, waiting for his explanation. Life is not easy for the villagers in Chunjia village. Every household is facing the situation of not being able to make ends meet. Wuhan explained. As for Chundao, he asked the entire village to help him with his work and then provided food for the entire village. As soon as these words came out, Su Jiwen and He Jian couldn't help but look at each other, and they could see the shock in each other's eyes. In this year, even the wealthy families in the county town had to reduce the food rations of their servants, but Chundao was feeding the entire village. This behavior is no longer just generous, it is extremely generous. Zhang He was also stunned, and couldn't help but think of the village in his hometown of Yangzhou. If there were people like Chundao in his village, so many people would not have starved to death, and he would not have to become a refugee and endure hunger all the way to Taiping County, right? Is this true? He Jian couldn't help but ask. Of course it's true. Wuhan thought without hesitation. I saw with my own eyes that Chundao treated all the villagers in Chunjia village to steamed buns. How could it be false? This. He Jian took a deep breath, the shock in his eyes becoming even more intense. He invited the whole village to dinner, and they were eating steamed buns. You know, in that year, many people couldn't even afford bran, but everyone in Chunjia village could eat steamed buns. Has life in Chunjia village really gotten this good? Not only He Jian, but even Su Jiwen was shocked. He was not the kind of mediocre official who was ignorant of the suffering of the people. He knew very well what kind of life the people were living now. It was precisely because he knew the difficulties of the people that Su Jiwen seemed particularly shocked at this time. Nowadays, even among the people in the county town, few can eat sorghum noodles every day, but in Chunjia village, everyone can eat steamed buns. This is fine without comparison, but once you compare, the shock in your heart will be particularly strong. Wuhan, who was secretly observing the expressions of Su Jiwen and the others, did not show any surprise on his face. In fact, when he saw all the villagers of Qinjiao village go to Chun Dao's house to get steamed buns, his reaction was not much better than Su Jiwen and the other two. Therefore, Wu Han had probably expected the reaction of Su Jiwen and the other two. This Qinjiao village is quite special. After being shocked, He Jian spoke. Su Jiwen and Zhang, he nodded subconsciously. In this year, when people generally cannot get enough to eat, Qinjiao village, where every household can eat steamed buns, is simply an anomaly. Su Jiwen looked at Wu Han and asked, "Do you often go to Qinjiao village to buy poultry?" "Yes." "When will we go to Qinjiao village next time?" "Tomorrow." "I'll go with you tomorrow." Thus, the decision was hastily made that County Magistrate Su Jiwen would follow Wu Han's caravan to Qinjiao village. Wu Han turned his head and glanced at Su Jiwen and Zhang he beside him, and the corners of his mouth twitched. The county lord, the most distinguished person in Taiping County, was actually mixed in with his own caravan. If he told others about this, no one would believe it. In fact, in the entire caravan, except Wu Han, no one knew the identities of Su Jiwen and Zhang He. They just regarded them as Wu Han's newly hired guards. "Old Wu." Su Jiwen looked at the goods being loaded onto the truck one after another and said with a smile, "You're doing quite a big business." Su Jiwen originally thought that Wu Han was just doing some small business at most, but now he realized that he had underestimated Wu Han, because there were 5 donkey carts in Wu Han's caravan at this time, and each donkey cart was full of goods. Most of these goods were daily necessities, such as grain and salt. In addition, there were also some books and pens, ink, paper, and inkstone. Su Jiwen looked at the books being loaded onto the truck and asked curiously, "Old Wu, are these books also needed by Qinjiao village?" "Yes." Wu Han nodded and said, "Brother Chen specifically asked me to bring this." Su Jiwen frowned, with even more doubts in his mind. It's not that he looked down on Qinjiao village, but these days there are too few people who have the conditions to go to school. Even in the county town, there are very few families who can afford to go to school, let alone the villages outside the city. In this case, the books, pens, ink, paper, and inkstone that Chun Dao asked Wu Han to buy were particularly puzzling. If the number was small, it could be explained that Chun Dao used them himself, but the number of books in this batch was obviously quite large, with hundreds of them in total. It was obviously impossible that they were used by Chun Dao alone. This Qinjiao village is really puzzling. Su Jiwen only felt that the entire Qinjiao village seemed to be shrouded in a fog, making it difficult for him to see its true appearance. Fortunately, he was about to arrive at Qinjiao village with the caravan, and by then he would be able to clear the fog and see the true appearance of Qinjiao village. Chapter 143, Happiness. After loading all the goods onto the donkey carts, the caravan slowly set off. Walking along the official road outside the city, Su Jiwen looked out at the dense forest on both sides and asked Wu Han beside him, "I heard there are a lot of bandits outside the city. Old Wu, have you encountered any bandits when you were transporting goods outside the city?" "No." Wu Han shook his head and said, "Every time I go out of the city to transport goods, I always bring a large number of young and strong men with me as guards. Those forest bandits are not stupid and will not choose to embarrass us." The bandits also knew that they had to pick on the weak. They often preferred to rob lone travelers and those caravans that looked relatively wealthy. But Wu Han, since they were not alone and did not look wealthy, the bandits naturally would not choose to fight them head-on. "I see." Su Jiwen suddenly realized that bullying the weak and fearing the strong was probably the basic character of these forest bandits. When faced with people who had no power to resist, they would naturally kill them. But when faced with Wu Han's caravan, which seemed difficult to deal with, they would choose to ignore them. After all, Wu Han's caravan was protected by more than a dozen young and strong men. If the bandits wanted to rob them, they would probably suffer considerable casualties themselves. "Brother Chun has encountered forest bandits before," Wu Han said casually. "I heard from the people in Qinjiao village that when Brother Chun and his men were returning to Qinjiao village from the county seat, they encountered a group of more than 10 bandits. However, they killed them all. Zhang he couldn't help but widen his eyes when he heard this. Although he knew that Qinjiao village was not simple, he couldn't help but be shocked when he heard that more than a dozen bandits were killed by people from Qinjiao village. Not only Zhang he, but even Su Jiwen was a little surprised and asked, "How did they kill all those bandits? What were their own casualties?" "I don't know the specific details." Wu Han shook his head and said, I only know that Brother Chun and his men suffered no casualties. As for those forest bandits, they were all turned into fertilizer for the forest. Nolosis. Zhang, he was even more shocked. He couldn't help but think of the night when he entered the city. That day, hundreds of them surrounded the 20 soldiers defending the city and lost dozens of people. However, the people of Chunjia village killed more than a dozen bandits without losing a single person. How could the people of Chunjia village be so full of martial virtue? Chunjia village. Su Jiwen's eyes moved, and his curiosity about Chunjia village grew. He couldn't wait to arrive at Chunjia village and learn more about it. The entrance of Chunjia village. Wu Zhong, who was in charge of guarding the village gate, looked at the approaching donkey cart from afar with a smile on his face. Now all the villagers in Chunjia village know that Wu Han is the designated merchant of Chun rice. Every time Wu Han comes, he brings a large amount of supplies. Therefore, the villagers of Chunjia village have always welcomed Wu Han's arrival. Chun Zhong came forward and said to Wu Han, who had just jumped off the donkey cart, with a smile, "I was wondering why I heard the magpies call this morning. Turns out it's Brother Wu." Wu Han laughed heartily and handed a small bag of food he had prepared in advance to Chun Zhong, saying, "Brother Chun Zhong, take this bag of food back. It's a small token of my appreciation." Every time Wu Han entered the village, he would give some small gifts to the young men guarding the village gate. This was not to bribe these people, but just to build good relations with the villagers of Chunjia village. The reason why Wu Han can live such a good life now is all thanks to the goods shipped from Chunjia village. Naturally, he has to have a good relationship with the villagers of Chunjia village. "Thank you, Brother Wu." Chun Zhong happily accepted the bag of grain. Nowadays, guarding the entrance of Chunjia village is a good job that everyone in the village is vying for. The reason is the small gift prepared by Wu Han. After accepting the gift, Chun Zhong said, "Brother Wu, please go in quickly. Brother Dao should be at home now." "Okay, then, Brother Chun Zhong, we'll see you later." Wu Han waved to Chun Zhong and then signaled the young man driving the donkey cart into the village. This Chunjia village looks no different from other villages, doesn't it? Zhang He, who was sitting next to Wu Han, couldn't help but frown. After listening to Wu Han's description of Chunjia village, he thought Chunjia village should be a very wealthy village, but the scene he saw before him was completely different from what he had imagined. Bumpy dirt roads, low houses, sparse population. This made Zhang He think of his hometown in Liangzhou. Chunjia village was not much different from his hometown village. "Don't worry, Brother Zhang, you'll know soon." As Wu Han finished speaking, a burst of noise was heard. However, at this time, the donkey cart had already entered Chunjia village. When everyone looked around, they saw a bustling crowd. What were they doing? Zhang He stared at the crowd in front of him with wide eyes, finally realizing the difference between Chunjia village and his hometown. At this time in his hometown, every household would have been hiding in their houses to keep warm, while in Chunjia village, hundreds of villagers gathered in front. At first glance, it seemed very lively, as if they were in a market. "Of course I'm getting steamed buns." Li Dabing smiled and replied, "The villagers of Chunjia village are all working for Daojur now. Daojur is responsible for providing them with food, 2 meals a day, and each meal is filled with steamed buns. Is it true that steamed buns can fill you up?" Zhang Yi looked at a man who had just walked out of Chun Dao's house with 4 or 5 steamed buns in his hands with an incredible look on his face. He was shocked. When Wu Han had heard Chun Dao provide food for the entire village, he had thought Chun Dao was just giving the villagers a bite to eat to keep them from starving to death. But he hadn't expected. That's not the case. The food provided by Chun Dao is not just to keep the villagers from going hungry, but to really fill their stomachs. Let the villagers of the whole village fill their stomachs. If it were the old Zhang, he would definitely not believe this kind of thing, because in his hometown village, almost no one had ever had a full meal. Everyone saved as much as possible and barely managed to avoid going hungry. But now, this kind of thing actually happened in front of Zhang He's eyes, which made him feel like he was in a dream. Looking at the happy, smiling faces of the villagers in Chunjia village, Zhang He couldn't help but think that if there was a person like Chun Dao in his hometown village, then all his relatives and fellow villagers who starved to death would have survived or even lived well. This Chunjia village is truly extraordinary. Su Jiwen squinted his eyes and looked at the sincere smiles on the faces of the villagers who received the steamed buns and couldn't help but sigh. The smiles on the faces of those villagers can probably be simply summed up in 2 words: Happiness. Chapter 144, County Magistrate? Su Jiwen had almost forgotten how long it had been since he had seen smiles like the ones on the faces of the villagers in Qinjia Village. When Su Jiwen took office in Taiping County, a coal disaster had already swept across Qingzhou. The crop harvest in Qingzhou, which could barely produce 2 crops a year, had plummeted and food prices soared. The heavy cost of living bent the backs of the people of Taiping County. Everyone's face was numb and lifeless, without a trace of smile. Even the slightly wealthier people in Taiping County look worried every day, as if they are always worried about where their food will come from tomorrow. At this moment, Su Jiwen saw the hopeful smiles of the people in this village outside the city, which looked extremely poor at first glance. This made Su Jiwen feel particularly complicated. He felt that he, the official of Taiping County, was not doing as well as Chun Dao. What are they going to do? Zhang He's voice came from the side, and it turned out that Zhang He saw the villagers who had received the steamed buns, each carrying their farm tools, and walking towards the south. I'm going to farm. Li Dabing answered without thinking. It would have been better if he hadn't said it. After he said it, Su Jiwen and Zhang He were even more confused. Farming? What kind of crops are you farming? It's so cold. What can be planted in the fields? The two were full of doubts, so they asked Li Dabing in detail. At the same time, at Chun Dao's home, Chun Dao was sitting in the main seat in the living room, and in front of Chun Dao were Chun He, Chun Da, Chun Jiang, Chun Si, and others. These people were specially called by Chun Dao to build the house. When inviting Su Shihua to live in Qinjia Village, Chun Dao had promised Su Shihua that he could provide them with accommodation. The next time Chun Dao goes to the city, Su Shihua and Su Qiaoshi will probably move to Qinjia Village, so the accommodation promised to them will naturally be put on the agenda. Village head. Chun Dao looked at Chun He and said, "Please pick out some strong men from the farmland to help me build a house." Build a house. Chun He took a look at the house that Chun Dao's family had just built and asked in confusion, "Brother Dao, why are you building a house?" Chun Dao replied, "Next time I go to the city, I will invite a doctor to come to the village to treat the villagers. This house will be a place for the doctor to stay." Upon hearing this, Chun He's eyes lit up. Doctors are definitely a scarce profession in Xia country, and for a place like Qinjia Village where people have to rely on themselves to cope with their illnesses, doctors are even more precious. "Brother Dao, is there really a doctor willing to settle in our village?" Chun He couldn't help but ask, his eyes full of anticipation. The attraction of medical resources to people has always been high in any era. Take China, where Chun Dao lived in his previous life, for example. How many people bought high-priced properties in the city for the city's excellent medical resources? Although the villagers of Qinjia Village always rely on their bodies to fight diseases, this does not mean that they do not want to see a doctor. If a doctor can settle in Qinjia Village, it will definitely be a great joy for Qinjia Village. Just look at the performance of Chun Da, Chun Jiang, and others. At this moment, they're also looking at Chun Dao expectantly, hoping that Chun Dao can give a positive answer. Real. Chun Dao nodded and said, "I have already made an agreement with a doctor in the city. Next time I go to the city, I will bring him to live in our village." Very good. Chun He couldn't help but shout out in surprise. The older people are, the higher their need for medical treatment. Chun He is already quite old, and it is indeed a blessing for him to have a doctor come to live in Qinjia Village. "Don't worry, Brother Dao. We will definitely build a beautiful house for the doctor to live in. It's definitely a good thing that a doctor can come and live in our village. We will definitely build a house for him." "Brother Dao, tell me, what kind of house should we build?" Chun Si and others also patted their chests and made guarantees. Although they were young and rarely got sick, they all had families and elderly people at home. Their need for medical treatment was no less than that of the village chief Chun He. "That's what I think." Chun Dao pondered for a moment and said, "The house we build for the doctor needs to be decent. It would be best if there were a shop in the front so that he could see patients and sell herbal medicine, and a yard and bedroom behind the shop." "Is that so?" Chun He had a rough idea in mind and nodded. "Okay, Brother Dao, I'll arrange for people to build this house right away." After saying that, Chun He was about to leave with Chun Si and others. But at this moment, a group of people came to the front yard. Chun Dao looked outside intently. A smile suddenly appeared on his face, and he said loudly, "Brother Wu is here. It's Wu the peddler, and Dao's 2 uncles." Chun He and others also laughed. Everyone in Qinjia Village treated Wu Han, the businessman, very well, because every time Wuhan came, he would bring a lot of supplies. Brother Chun, Wuhan, who had left several young men to guard the goods outside, walked into the house with a smile on his face and said, "The things you asked me to buy last time have been delivered." Oh, Chen Dao's eyes lit up, and he was about to ask everyone to get up and go outside to unload the goods. But his eyes suddenly fixed on a middle-aged man in Confucian clothing next to Wuhan. "Su County Magistrate, why are you here?" Chen Dao cried out in surprise. This middle-aged man was none other than Su Jiwen, whom he had met once at the Fuhu boxing gym. County Magistrate? Chun He, Chen Da, Chun Si, and others were shocked. Although the people in Xinjia village preferred to call the county magistrate county master, it did not mean that they did not know what a county magistrate was. The county magistrate is the highest official in the entire Taiping County, in charge of the entire Taiping County. How could such a person appear in a remote Xinjia village? Friend Chun. Su Jiwen smiled and said, "I'm extremely curious about your Xinjia village, so I came here uninvited. I hope you don't mind, young friend Chun." Chen Dao was speechless. If Su Jiwen had come uninvited in the past, he would definitely not be happy. After all, his family had too many secrets. If Su Jiwen, the county magistrate, knew these secrets, his own safety would be difficult to guarantee. However, Chen Dao's mentality has changed now. With the rapid growth of military power in his family, Chen Dao is no longer as timid as before. In the entire Taiping County, the highest level of martial arts was only that of a 7th-rank warrior, but Xiao Yuan from Chen Dao's family was comparable in strength to a 6th-rank warrior. In other words, in the entire Taiping County, there is basically no one who can threaten Chen Dao. Therefore, even if Su Jiwen knows his secret, Chen Dao will not care too much. Chapter 145, Facing a Formidable Enemy. "Of course I don't mind." Chen Dao's eyes rolled, and he said with a smile, "Please take a seat, County Magistrate Su." Chen Dao welcomed Su Jiwen to sit next to him and immediately introduced him to the village chief and others. "Village chief, this is the magistrate of Taiping County. County Magistrate Su." "It's really the county magistrate." Chen Yi's eyes widened involuntarily, and he was extremely unbelievable. To be honest, when Chen Sheng spread the rumor in the village that Chen Dao was chatting and laughing with the county magistrate, Chen Yi actually didn't believe it. In his opinion, the county magistrate was a top figure, and there was no way Chen Dao could make friends with him. It was not until now that Chen He was sure that this was true. Not only did Chen Dao know the magistrate of Taiping County, he could also communicate with him on an equal footing. Not only Chen He, but even Chen Da and others looked at Su Jiwen, who was sitting next to Chen Dao, in astonishment. His expression was dull, and he even forgot to salute. When they entered the city with Chen Dao before, they had been waiting outside and had not been able to see Su Jiwen, so they were particularly shocked at this moment. This is the county magistrate, the most important figure in Taiping County. How could he appear in a remote village like Xinjia village? For a moment, the entire living room was extremely quiet. Even the people in Wuhan's caravan were stunned. They had never imagined that this middle-aged man who had been following the caravan and looked gentle and approachable was actually the magistrate of Taiping County. Friend Chun. Su Jiwen didn't seem to care about the looks from the crowd. He smiled and said, "Your village is quite special." While speaking, Su Jiwen kept looking at the steam buns in everyone's hands. Before, Chen Dao and others were actually eating and chatting, and at this time, the village chief Chun He and others were still holding steam buns in their hands. County Magistrate Su is joking. Chen Dao smiled and replied, "Our Chunjia village is just an ordinary, poor village. What's so special about it? Ordinary." Su Jiwen felt that he didn't fully understand the word ordinary. In an ordinary village, how could everyone eat steam buns for every meal? "I think you're joking, Mr. Chun. How can there be an ordinary village where people can eat white flour buns every day? In our village, we only eat white flour buns occasionally, not every day." Really? Looking at Chen Dao, who was talking and laughing with Su Jiwen, the shock in the eyes of the village chief Chun He, Chen Da and others, and Wu Han, who brought Su Jiwen here, became more and more intense. Who is the county magistrate? It is no exaggeration to say that it is the sky of Taiping County. It's no exaggeration to say that this kind of person is a world away from Wuhan status. And Chen Dao, a young man from Xinjia village, could chat and laugh with the county magistrate, and even lie to deceive him. In front of Su Jiwen, Even an adult like him was timid and had to serve him carefully all the way, fearing that he would displease the county lord. However, Chun Dao was able to treat the county lord so calmly. There's really no comparison between this person and others. County Magistrate Su, please wait a moment. After chatting with Su Jiwen for a while, Chun Dao asked Su Jiwen to wait inside for a while. After placing Xia Yuan on his seat, Chun Dao said to Wu Han, "Brother Wu, the goods are outside the door, right?" "Yes." Wu Han nodded subconsciously. After receiving the answer, Chun Dao said to Chun Da and the others, "Let's go. Let's go unload the cargo together." Upon hearing this, Chun Da and others quickly got up and fled out of the house. "I was so scared." Chun Si, who had come out of the house, exhaled and said, "The county magistrate's authority is too great. I feel uncomfortable all over." Upon hearing this, everyone nodded in agreement. Regardless of whether Su Jiwen had any official authority, his identity as a county magistrate alone was enough to make them in awe. Therefore, when they were in the room just now, they didn't dare to say a word for fear of upsetting Su Jiwen. There's nothing to be afraid of about the county magistrate. Just treat him normally from now on, Chun Dao said with a smile. Everyone who heard this was grumbling in their hearts, saying, "Brother Dao is really bold. Not only did he dare to lie to the county magistrate, but he also told us to treat him normally. He is the county magistrate, the most important person in Taiping County. How can we have the courage to treat him normally?" "Brother Wu," Chun Dao looked at Wu Han and asked, "Have you bought all the books, brushes, inkstones, and writing brushes I asked you to buy?" "I bought it." Wu Han pointed to a donkey cart and said, "It's all on this cart. The others are all loaded with grain." "Become." Chun Dao thought for a moment and said to Chun Da and the others, "Uncle, you can move the books, writing brushes, paper, and inkstone to Mr. Li's house. As for the food, you can move it into my house." So everyone started to unload the goods. The people brought by Wu Han moved the grain to Chun Dao's home, while Chun Da and others moved the books, pens, ink, paper, and inkstone brought by Wu Han to Li Zheng's home. While everyone was moving things in the living room of Chun Dao's house, Su Jiwen was looking at the situation of Chun Dao's house. Chun Dao's house was not much different from the houses of other villagers. They were all made of wood, and the warmth retention effect was only average. Sitting in the living room, Su Jiwen could even feel the cold wind blowing in through the gaps in the wooden boards. Of course, for a 7th grade warrior like Su Jiwen, this little bit of cold wind was not enough to make him feel cold. In addition to the cold wind, Su Jiwen could also hear the whispers of women coming from the kitchen next door. They were Li Ping and others who were busy in the kitchen. They knew from the noise that someone had come to the living room, so they did not appear outside the kitchen, but were whispering about the identity of the visitor in the kitchen. Su Jiwen had no intention of disturbing the women in Chun Dao's family. He just pricked up his ears and listened to the sounds coming from the backyard. It seems to be the sound of chickens and ducks. Su Jiwen muttered to himself uncertainly. The noise coming from the backyard was quite noisy. Not only were there human voices, but there were also animal calls. It was difficult for Su Jiwen to discern the specific sounds for a while, but there was one thing Su Jiwen was certain of, that is, there must be a huge number of livestock in the backyard of Chun Dao's house. Thinking of this, Su Jiwen was about to turn around and try to see the situation in the backyard through the gap in the wooden board behind him. But at this moment, Su Jiwen noticed a sharp gaze. But he saw that where Chun Dao was originally sitting, a silly-looking animal that looked like a cat and a bear was lying on the chair, staring at Su Jiwen with sharp eyes like guarding a prisoner. This is... Su Jiwen immediately recognized the animal. It was none other than the kitten that had been hanging on Chun Dao's shoulder at the Fuhu boxing gym last time, making Li Hu aware of the danger. For some reason, although this kitten looked stupid and had no other advantages except for its good looks, the moment it stared at him, Su Jiwen felt as if he was facing a formidable enemy, and the alarm bells in his heart were ringing. This made Su Jiwen immediately give up the idea of checking the backyard, because he was sure that if he insisted on exploring the backyard, he would definitely be attacked by this kitten. Chapter 146 Shocking. At Li Zheng's home, looking at the books, pens, ink, paper, and inkstone brought by Chun Da and others, Li Zheng's face never stopped smiling. He was a scholar, but due to his own financial conditions, he could only buy very few books. Even writing became a luxury for him. Fortunately, he no longer needs to worry about this problem. With the books, pens, ink, paper, and inkstone brought by Chun Dao, Li Zheng can write freely in the future. As for those books, those that are for children's enlightenment, such as 1,000-character classic and 3-character classic, are not suitable for Li Zheng to read. Mr. Li, Chenny smiled and said to Li Zheng, "School will start tomorrow. You must teach the children in the village to read." As the news that Chun Dao gave priority to admitting literate people spread throughout Qinjiao village, the issue of children's education has become a most concerned issue for the villagers of Qinjiao village, and Li Zheng has also become one of the most popular figures in Qinjiao village. During these 3 days, many villagers came to Li Zheng's house to give him gifts and ask him to teach his children well. Of course, Li Zheng did not accept those gifts. Although most of the gifts sent by the villagers were not particularly precious things, such as food and wild vegetables, the villagers of Qinjiao village were not living well now, so Li Zheng was naturally embarrassed to accept them. What's more, the reason why Li Zheng was able to serve as a teacher again was entirely due to Chun Dao's contribution. How could Li Zheng dare to take credit for it? "Don't worry, village chief," Li Zheng smiled and said, "I will definitely do my best to teach the children in the village well. Then I'll be relieved." Soon after, all the books, pens, ink, paper, and inkstone were moved into Li Zheng's school, and then Chun Dao and Wu Han returned to their own house together. As for Chun He and the others, they were still somewhat afraid of the county magistrate Su Jiwen, so they did not return with Chun Dao. Instead, they went directly to the farmland and arranged for people to build houses. Friend Chun. Seeing Chun Dao coming back, Su Jiwen smiled and asked, "I heard your village is planting crops." Chun Dao was silent for a moment. He knew that the fact that Qinjiao village was farming could not be hidden from others. After all, the farmland was so large. No matter how capable Chun Dao was, it was impossible for him to keep others unaware. Not to mention anything else, the villagers of Xiao village all knew that crops had been planted in the fields of Qinjiao village. "That's true," Su Jiwen had asked, and Chun Dao couldn't hide it, so he replied, "The crops in the fields have sprouted." "What?" When Chun Dao said this, Su Jiwen, Zhang He, and Wu Han were all stunned. They knew that the entire Qinjiao village was farming, but they didn't know that the crops planted in Qinjiao village had already sprouted. It is not uncommon for crops to sprout. In Xia, a country that mainly relies on agriculture, even a figure like Su Jiwen has seen the scene of crops sprouting. But it is a miracle that it sprouts in such cold weather. The cold disaster had been sweeping across Qingzhou for several years, and it had become a consensus throughout Qingzhou that no crops could be grown in the second half of the year. However, Chun Dao told them that the crops planted in Qinjiao village had already sprouted. How could everyone not be shocked? "Friend Chun," Su Jiwen said in a somewhat dry voice, "have the crops you planted really sprouted?" Food has always been Su Jiwen's concern. If he wants to govern Taiping County well, he cannot lack food. Therefore, when he heard Chun Dao say that the crops have sprouted, Su Jiwen showed a rare look of shock on his face and even suspected whether Chun Dao was making fun of him. "Of course it's true," Chun Dao said without hesitation. "If the county magistrate is interested, you can go and take a look." "Of course I have to go and see it." Su Jiwen didn't want to wait even for a second and stood up to ask Chun Dao to take him to see the farmland. Even Zhang He and Wu Han had anxious looks on their faces. They really wanted to know whether the crops in Qinjiao village had really sprouted. "Then let's go." Chun Dao had no intention of keeping anyone in suspense. After hanging Xiao Yuan on his shoulders, Chun Dao led a few people towards the farmland south of the village. In the farmland, the villagers of Qinjiao village are still busy. After eating steamed buns in the morning, they're working very actively. Everyone is carefully protecting the newly sprouted seedlings in the fields for fear of damaging them. "This wheat is growing well. We're sure to have a good harvest." An old villager said with a smile that he was very familiar with the growth of crops, as he had been farming for most of his life. As soon as he saw the wheat in the field, he knew that the wheat would definitely have a good harvest. Of course, this is also related to the careful care of the villagers of Qinjiao village. They have never slacked off in the daily irrigation and fertilization, which has led to the good growth of the wheat. Yes. I don't know where Brother Dao found this magical wheat seed. It can actually grow in such cold weather. Don't ask too much about Dao Guer's affairs. Just do your work well. With this wheat, no one in our village will starve to death anymore. That's right. With Dao Guer's personality, he will definitely not let us go hungry. Whenever the villagers who are busy in the fields see the tender sprouts in the fields, a smile full of hope always appears on their faces. These wheats are the capital for the survival of Qinjiao village. It actually sprouted. Standing at the edge of the farmland in Chunjia village, Su Jiwen looked at the tender green in the field with a dull look in his eyes. 3 days later, most of the wheat that had been planted had sprouted. Looking around, the vast farmland was dotted with tender green, as if it was spring. Zhang He and Wuhan also looked at the situation in the farmland stupidly, and were shocked. They really couldn't believe that in such cold weather, crops could actually be grown in the farmland of Qinjia village. Zhang He couldn't help but step into the field and carefully inspected each wheat seedling. After confirming that it was not fake, the shock in his heart was beyond words. How on earth is this done? Zhang He muttered to himself. Coming from a rural background, he might not know as much about crops as the old farmers in Qinjia village, but he definitely knew more than Chun Dao. In Zhang He's inherent concept, although there are winter wheat varieties of wheat, winter wheat cannot grow in such cold weather. If winter wheat could grow in such cold weather, why would there be so many starving people in Liangzhou? But the wheat seedlings in front of him, which had sprouted and were growing well, completely shattered Zhang He's inherent ideas. In this world, there actually is wheat that can grow in freezing weather. Chapter 147, How Did You Do It? Su Jiwen stared at the tender green of the field for a long moment, then turned and stared into Chun Dao's eyes, saying, Young friend Chun, how did you do it? As an official, Su Jiwen knew better than anyone the importance of the sprouting wheat in front of him. If this kind of wheat could be popularized, then would Qingzhou still be short of food? Not to mention Qingzhou, even Liangzhou, where the weather is even colder than Qingzhou, would probably be able to grow crops so there wouldn't be widespread starvation and people being displaced. This is the wheat seed I got from the vast mountains. Chen Dao smiled and gave the explanation he had prepared long ago. This wheat seed is quite special. It can grow in extremely cold weather. It turns out that it was obtained from the vast mountains. Su Jiwen and Zhang He nodded subconsciously. It was a consensus among all the Xia people that Kangmang Mountain was vast and boundless, and that it contained countless rare treasures. Therefore, when they heard Chen Dao say that the grain seeds came from Kangmang Mountain, they did not have any doubts. It's a very simple truth. This kind of magical grain can only be produced in Kangmang Mountain. My friend, Su Jiwen stared at Chen Dao without blinking and asked in a deep voice, Do you have any extra grains? The moment he saw the wheat, Su Jiwen had a preliminary idea in his mind. If Chun Dao still had extra wheat seeds, he could get the seeds from Chun Dao and then return to the county and give the seeds to the people to plant. Although this cannot immediately alleviate the food shortage in Taiping County, we only need to wait for a few months to harvest a new batch of food. By then, the entire Taiping County will no longer have to worry about food shortages. Gone. Chen Dao naturally wouldn't tell Su Jiwen the truth, so he replied, I didn't get much of this wheat seed in Kangmang Mountain, and I've already planted it all in the fields. Hearing this, Su Jiwen frowned and looked at the malt in the field, thinking to himself that the wheat seeds in Chun Dao's hands were gone. If he wanted to get more wheat seeds, he could only wait for this batch of wheat to mature. It takes at least 3 to 4 months for wheat to mature, which means we may have to wait until spring to get new wheat seeds. By then, the weather had turned warmer. Of course, this does not mean that cold-resistant wheat seeds, such as Chun Dao, are useless. The cold disaster is still continuing, and no one knows when it will end. Cold-resistant wheat seeds, such as Chun Dao, will still be useful when the weather gets cold next year. What a pity! Su Jiwen sighed lightly, looked at the malt in the field reluctantly for a long time, and then returned home with Chun Dao. At this time, Chun Dao also walked in with several cages of white-feathered chickens. Brother Wu, this is today's white-feathered chicken. Chun Dao placed the cage of white-feathered chickens in front of Wuhan and said, There are 20 in total. Do you think the number is correct? No need to look. Wuhan smiled and waved his hand, saying, I believe Brother Chun won't cheat me. Wuhan, who had done business with Qinjia village many times, knew Chun Dao's character very well. Since Chun Dao said there were 20, then there were 20, definitely not less or more. Su Jiwen and Zhang He looked at the chickens in the cage. Their eyes moved slightly. The chicken breed in Qinjia village was indeed as special as they knew. The most common chicken breed on the market in Xia country is the gray-feathered chicken. Not only does it have gray feathers and look unattractive, but it is also very small in size. In fact, because most people are reluctant to feed more food when raising chickens, most gray-feathered chickens are very thin. After being killed and plucked, It feels like there are more bones than meat. On the other hand, the white-feathered chickens brought by Chun looked completely different from the gray-feathered chickens. They were larger, had brighter feathers, and looked fatter. It was obvious at a glance that they must produce a lot of meat. A white-feathered chicken costs 251, a total of 5 taels of silver. Is this a good price, Brother Chun? After some mental calculation, Wu Han gave a price for purchasing white-feathered chickens. As the number of white-feathered chickens Wu Han transported to the city increased, Li Ying from the Fuhu boxing gym could no longer eat so many chickens. Wu Han had to sell them in the market, which also caused the price of white-feathered chickens to drop a lot. After all, not all the people in a county town are as rich as Li Ying. I'm afraid that the people in a county town won't even look at a white-feathered chicken that costs 500 won. That's right. Shengda nodded. Although 251 for a white-feathered chicken was not as profitable as before, it was still profitable for him. After all, the cost of raising a white-feathered chicken was only a gray-feathered chicken and 3 free chicken heart grasses. Okay, then I'll give you money. Wu Han took out 5 taels of silver from the wallet at his waist and handed it to Chun Dao. As for the money for the goods he had transported, Chun Dao had already paid him. After the two men finished their transaction, Chun Dao suddenly said, "Wu, wait a moment, I have some chickens to sell." After saying that, Chun Dao opened the door to the backyard and said to Chun Lian, who was busy in the backyard, "Sister Lian, bring 5 old yellow-feathered chickens over here." "Here I come." Chun Lian started working immediately after hearing the call. In the living room, Su Jiwen and Zhang, he looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes as they saw the scene in the backyard through the open door. The backyard of Chun Dao's house was filled with chickens and ducks. There were so many of them that the two of them couldn't tell how many there were. As for Wu Han, he didn't look surprised at all. He had seen the situation in Chun Dao's backyard more than once and was very familiar with it. Squeak! The courtyard gate was closed, blocking out Su Jiwen and Zhang He's sight. At the same time, Chun Dao, holding a chicken cage, said to Wu Han, "Brother Wu, these are yellow-feathered chickens. They're a better breed than white-feathered chickens, and the meat quality is also better than yellow-feathered chickens. Are you interested?" Yes. Wu Han nodded hurriedly. "Brother Chun, how much is this yellow-feathered chicken?" "It's a little more expensive than white-feathered chicken." Chun Dao thought for a moment and said, "A yellow-feathered chicken costs 400 coins. Brother Wu, you might consider buying it." In the past, Chun Dao sold yellow-feathered chickens to Li Ying for 1 or 2 taels of silver each. But now Li Ying can no longer eat so many yellow-feathered chickens, so naturally he has to lower the price. 400 coins per chicken is the price that Chun Dao has considered carefully. 401. Wu Han fell in a deep thought. Yellow-feathered chickens are slightly larger than white-feathered chickens, but not by much. Judging solely by their meat value, yellow-feathered chickens could not possibly be sold at nearly twice the price of white-feathered chickens. But, looking at the golden yellow feathers of the yellow-feathered chickens, Wu Han nodded and said, "I want all 5 of these yellow-feathered chickens." After saying that, Wu Han took out 2 taels of silver and handed it to Chun Dao. Chun Dao also handed the cage containing the yellow-feathered chicken to Wu Han. Chapter 148 More Puzzles. After the transaction was completed, Wu Han chatted with Chun Dao for a while, then stood up and said goodbye. He still needed to rush back to the city to sell the white-feathered chickens and yellow-feathered chickens as soon as possible. Therefore, Wu Han did not stay long. He soon said goodbye and left with his caravan, Su Jiwen and Zhang He. The caravan left Qinjiao village and drove on the official road. Su Jiwen stared at the entrance of Qinjiao village with a complicated expression. This trip to Qinjiao village not only failed to resolve the doubts in his mind, but made him even more confused. Whether it is wheat seeds that can grow in the cold winter or those magical chicken breeds, they're not things that should be found in a remote village like Qinjiao village. But these things all appeared in Qinjiao village at once, which made Su Jiwen really unable to understand. "County Master," Zhang Yi suddenly said, "when Chun Dao opened the door just now, I saw a lot of blood-feathered chickens." Su Jiwen noted that he was a 7th-rank warrior and had better eyesight than Zhang He. Naturally, he also saw the blood-feathered chickens in the backyard. In addition to the blood-feathered chickens, he also saw several chickens that were half a person's height and had red claws. This was also the most difficult thing for Su Jiwen to understand. How could Chun Dao get so many chickens? You know, although Kangming Mountain has countless treasures, there are also many dangers in the mountain. Even Su Jiwen, a 7th grade warrior, does not dare to step into the mountain casually. Under such circumstances, it is very puzzling that Shan Dao could obtain so many chicken breeds and even find magical wheat seeds in the vast mountains. With countless doubts in his heart, Su Jiwen and Wu Han's caravan returned to Taiping County. Wu Han originally thought that Su Jiwen and the other man would leave after arriving at the county town, but when he saw that the two men were still sitting on his donkey cart and had no intention of moving, Wu Han had no choice but to take the two men with him to sell goods. After asking the young driver to park the donkey cart in front of the door of the Fu Hu boxing gym, Wu Han entered the gym carrying a chicken cage and handed the cage to Li Ying. Although Li Ying couldn't eat that much chicken, her love for it remained undiminished. Every time Wu Han brought back white-feathered chickens, she would buy a few, and this time was no exception. There are yellow-feathered chickens. Li Ying looked at the chicken coop that Wu Han was carrying with surprise. During this period of time, because Chun Dao did not sell yellow-feathered chickens, Li Ying had been eating white-feathered chickens. At this moment, when she suddenly saw Wu Han's yellow-feathered chickens, she was immediately very happy. This time I brought a total of 5 yellow-feathered chickens and 20 white-feathered chickens. I wonder how many Miss Li plans to take. Wu Han asked with a smile. Just by looking at Li Ying's performance, he knew that he would definitely make a lot of profit from Li Ying this time. As expected, Li Ying thought for a moment and said, "Let's have 3 yellow-feathered chickens and 3 white-feathered chickens." After saying this, Li Ying fished out his purse and said, "I remember the yellow-feathered chicken was 1 tael of silver each, and the white-feathered chicken would be 300 won each, based on the recent price. Is that correct, Mr. Wu?" "That's right." Wu Han nodded with a smile on his face. It only cost 400 coins to buy a yellow-feathered chicken from Chun Dao, and he could sell it to Li Ying for 1 or 2 taels of silver. The profit of 600 coins made Wu Han smile from ear to ear. "For you." Li Ying counted out 4 taels of silver and handed it to Wu Han. Without asking Wu Han to change the money, he directly picked up the chicken coop and went into the kitchen, presumably to start cooking the chicken. Wu Han walked out of the Fu Hu boxing gym with a smile on his face and said to the young man driving the car, "Let's go to the East Market." Soon, the donkey cart stopped at the street where Wu Han and Chun Dao had met. Wu Han first asked the young men to put the chicken coop on the ground, and then he sat behind the chicken coop, waiting for customers to come. Su Jiwen didn't mind the dirt on the ground. He sat down next to Wu Han and said in a casual tone, "Old Wu, you must have gained a lot in the Fu Hu boxing gym just now, right?" It's all right. Speaking of this, a smile suddenly appeared on Wu Han's face. The eldest lady of Fu Hu boxing gym is very generous. She gave a yellow-feathered chicken for 1 tael of silver. After these words were spoken, Su Jiwen didn't react at all, but Zhang He beside Su Jiwen was stunned. When he was in Chenjiao village, he saw the transaction between Chun Dao and Wu Han with his own eyes, and he knew the price of yellow-feathered chickens very clearly. "I bought a yellow-feathered chicken for 400 coins and sold it for 1 tael of silver, a profit of 600 coins. Is there such a profitable business in this world?" Zhang He couldn't help but have an idea. This business is so profitable. Should I try my hand at it? Even though Zhang He has no worries about food and drink now, he is short of money. Zhang He, who had already started practicing martial arts, had an extremely high demand for money. Whether it was blood feather chicken or medicinal materials needed for martial arts, they all required a large amount of silver to purchase. However, the monthly salary Zhang He received from the government office was not even 1 or 2 taels of silver. It was only because Su Jiwen appreciated him that he had any hope of becoming a martial artist. Otherwise, he would have absolutely no chance of becoming a martial artist. Under such circumstances, it is natural that Zhang He would be interested in this business. Old Wu. Just as Zhang He was daydreaming, a neatly dressed man appeared in front of Wu Han's stall. This person was obviously acquaintance with Wu Han. He pointed at the yellow-feathered chicken in the cage and asked, "How much are these chickens?" "It's Brother Fan." Wu Han looked up at the man and immediately laughed. The man's name was Fan Xiong. Although his family was not rich, they had some wealth, so even in this year they could still afford to buy meat. "This chicken is called yellow feather chicken. I'm afraid it's going to be a bit more expensive." Wu Han thought for a moment and replied, "It costs 600 coins each." "So expensive?" Fan Xiong opened his eyes wide and said, "Now the gray-feathered chickens on the market are only a little over 100 to 200 coins each, and the yellow-feathered chickens are more than 3 times more expensive than the white-feathered chickens." This price made Fan Xiong a little unacceptable for a while. This price is not expensive. Wu Han displayed his eloquence as a businessman. Brother Fan, look at this chicken. Its feathers are golden yellow. It looks so rich and noble. It's huge, and the meat is plump and tender. 600 coins is not expensive at all. It's expensive too expensive. Fan Xiong still shook his head. No matter how nice Wu Han's words sounded, 600 coins was still too expensive. Well, Wu Han scratched his head and pointed at the white-feathered chicken, saying, Brother Fan, if you think it's expensive, you can buy this white-feathered chicken. It's only 300 coins each. Brother Fan, you've bought white-feathered chicken from me before, so you should know that it tastes much better than the gray-feathered chicken. White-feathered chicken does taste good. Fan Xiong nodded in agreement. He had bought white-feathered chickens from Wu Han before and knew very well that white-feathered chickens were far superior to gray-feathered chickens in terms of both meat weight and taste. But at this time, Fan Xiong didn't even look at the white-feathered chicken. His eyes were fixed on the yellow-feathered chicken. Chapter 149, The Holy Body of the Profligate Merchant. Fan Xiong didn't even look at the white-feathered chicken. He stared at the yellow-feathered chicken and asked, Old Wu, can you make your yellow-feathered chicken cheaper? Well, Wu Han didn't quite understand Fan Xiong's obsession with the yellow-feathered chicken, but he still said, Brother Fan, if you really want one, I can sell it to you at a loss. 581 each. 581. Fan Xiong frowned and thought for a moment before saying, 550 coins, is that okay? No, no. Wu Han said with a pained look on his face, 580 when is just hard-earned money. If it's 551, I, Wu Han, will really lose money. 560 coins. Fan Xiong gritted his teeth and raised the price by another 10 cents. No. Wu Han still shook his head. 570 coins. All right, since you've taken care of my business, Brother Fan, I'll charge you 570 coins each. Wu Han agreed with a reluctant look, but he was actually very happy in his heart. Wu Han bought the yellow-feathered chicken for 401 each. He thought it would be good if he could sell it for 501, but he didn't expect to sell it for a high price of 571. Then give me one quickly. Fan Xiong counted out 570 copper coins from his purse and handed them to Wu Han, then left happily carrying a yellow-feathered chicken. Obviously, he was very satisfied with the deal. Li Dabing and Li Feng, who were standing not far from Wu Han, watched Wu Han bargaining with the customers and felt that they had learned something. The purchase price of this yellow-feathered chicken was only 400 coins each, but Wu Han, who sold it for 570 coins, looked very painful. The lifelike expression on his face was truly amazing. Even Zhang, he looked thoughtful, and sighed in his heart that he probably still had a lot to learn about doing business. Congratulations, old Wu, Su Jiwen said with a smile. You earned 170 coins for one chicken. Your business is really good. Hey. Seeing Fan Xiong had already gone far away, Wu Han put away the pained expression on his face and laughed. I don't know what this Brother Fan is thinking. I think this yellow-feathered chicken is not much better than the white-feathered chicken, but he didn't even look at the white-feathered chicken. He was only thinking about buying the yellow-feathered chicken. Of course, it's because of the color of this yellow-feathered chicken. Su Jiwen said. Hearing this, everyone turned their eyes to the remaining yellow-feathered chicken in the cage and suddenly realized. The feathers of yellow-feathered chickens are golden in color, but in the land of Xia, yellow is the exclusive color of the royal family. Ordinary people, even dignitaries, are not allowed to wear yellow clothes. In this case, the color yellow naturally becomes a symbol of nobility and wealth. In addition, the people of Xia State are generally superstitious. Combined with these two factors, it is not surprising that the yellow-feathered chicken with golden feathers can be sold at such a high price. After all, the yellow-feathered chicken's feathers might really symbolize wealth? This is Fan Xiong's truest thought. Even if it is just for this thought, he will choose yellow-feathered chicken instead of white-feathered chicken without hesitation. So that's the truth. Wu Han laughed, feeling that he had made the right decision by buying these 5 yellow-feathered chickens. The profit from a white-feathered chicken was only about 50 coins, while the profit from a yellow-feathered chicken, not counting the 3 bought by Li Ying, was 170 coins, far more than the white-feathered chicken. Boss! At this time, another customer stopped in front of Wu Han's stall, staring intently at the only yellow-feathered chicken in the cage, and asked, How much is your chicken? Wu Han looked up at the man, but he didn't seem familiar with him. He said without hesitation, 800 coins each. So expensive? The guest asked the same question as Fan Xiong. But although he said it was expensive, he did not move his feet at all, and his eyes were fixed on a yellow-feathered chicken without moving away. Not expensive, not expensive, Wu Han said quickly. This yellow-feathered chicken wasn't easy to come by. I only got it by chance. Look at this chicken, sir. Its feathers are golden without a trace of other colors. It's truly a rich and luxurious chicken. You won't be disappointed if you spend 800 coins on it. Zhang He, Li Dabing, and the others couldn't help but open their mouths, secretly cursing the profiteer. They had just quoted a price of 600 coins for a yellow-feathered chicken, but in the blink of an eye, it had increased to 800 coins, and they had even changed their sales tactics. All they could say was, Wu Han is truly a born profiteer. This chicken is really good. The customer nodded, seeming to fully agree with Wu Han's words. But 800 won per chicken is still too expensive. An ordinary gray-feathered chicken is only 180 won per chicken. Your yellow-feathered chicken is more than 4 times more expensive than a gray-feathered chicken. How can a gray-feathered chicken compare to a yellow-feathered chicken? Wu Han shook his head and said, that gray-feathered chicken has gray feathers, which is not only ugly, but also weighs less than 2 tails. It's nothing like my yellow-feathered chicken, which has rich feathers and a plump body. That's the truth. The customer secretly agreed in his heart, but said, anyway, 800 won is still too expensive. How about 700 won? No, at least 781. 720 coins. 770 coins. 750 coins. Make a deal. After some bargaining, the last yellow-feathered chicken was bought by the customer. Wu Han happily put the 750 coins into his purse and continued to wait for customers to come. Not long after, many customers came to the store one after another, and after the yellow-feathered chickens were gone, the white-feathered chickens also attracted the attention of customers. This chicken is truly remarkable. Its feathers are snow white and it's huge. It looks much better than a gray-feathered chicken. That's right. I've eaten a lot of gray-feathered chickens. The meat is dry and tough, and the skin is so greasy it's almost like chewing wax. This chicken looks so good, it must taste good. Give me one. Soon, all the white-feathered chickens on Wu Han's stall were sold out at an average price of 300 coins. At this time, the sun was about to set. Wu Han calculated the profits from his trip to Qinjia village. He earned a total of 20 white-feathered chickens, a profit of 1 tael of silver, and 2 taels and 3 cents of silver from the yellow-feathered chickens, for a total profit of 3 taels and 3 cents. After counting, Wu Han began to pay the young and strong men who helped transport the goods. 150 coins per person. Come and get your money. Wu Han shouted, and the young and strong men immediately gathered around with smiles, each receiving 150 coins. Brother Wu is still so generous. He always gives us a lot. A young man happily put 150 coins into his arms and said with a smile that Wu Han was very good to them who helped to protect the goods, and he would share a lot of the profits from each business with them. Yes, working with Angkor is really comfortable. It's not like doing hard labor in those shops where you get beaten and scolded by the shopkeepers at any time. Brother Wu treats us very well. I will follow him from now on. Me too. Chapter 150 New School Bag. After receiving the money from Wu Han, the young men left with smiles on their faces. Each of them received 150 coins. Although it did not make them rich, it was enough to barely fill their family stomachs. It was better than doing manual labor for others, which was not only tiring, but also only earning 20 or 30 coins a day, which was not enough to fill their stomachs. After the young men left, Wu Han said to Su Jiwen, County Master, would you like to come to my house for a simple meal? No. Su Jiwen shook his head and refused. Seeing this, Wu Han didn't say much. He got on the donkey cart with Zhang Ming's 3 brothers and Li Dabing's 2 brothers and headed home. Su Jiwen stared at their backs and remained silent for a long time. Today's trip to Qinjia village really opened his eyes. The wheat seeds that could grow in the cold winter climate, the countless chickens and ducks in Chun Dao's backyard, and the strange-looking chicken breeds, all of these made Su Jiwen, a man with broad knowledge, feel incomprehensible. Zhang He. Su Jiwen looked at Zhang He beside him and said, What do you think of Qinjia village? Very special. Zhang He pondered and said, This Qinjia village is full of strange things, but it can be seen that the villagers of Qinjia village live a very good life. Although the overall environment of Chenjia village looks quite poor, it is undeniable that the villagers live a very good life. They have enough steam buns to eat every day. In the eyes of Zhang He, who was a refugee before, this kind of life, although not like the life of a god, is almost the same. Is that so? Su Jiwen lowered his head and pondered for a moment before continuing. I noticed just now that you seem to be paying special attention to Wuhan. So you want to do some business too? To be honest with you, I do want to do some business. Zhang He said bluntly, although I have no worries about food and drink now that I have this job as a constable. The expenses of practicing martial arts in daily life are still not small. I was thinking that since business in Chenjia village is so good, could I also do some business? I'm afraid it won't be easy. Su Jiwen didn't think there was anything wrong with Zhang. He wanted to do business. Instead, he said, Wuhan is clearly very trusted by Chun Dao and the villagers of Chenjia village. That's why he was able to obtain the purchasing rights for these white-feathered and yellow-feathered chickens. If it were someone else, I'm afraid the people of Chenjia village might not be willing to sell them. There's always a way. Zhang Yi's eyes flashed with thought. Chen Dao has so many chickens and ducks at home. They must have come from somewhere. Wuhan may not be able to eat them all. In fact, what Zhang He wanted to do most was the blood feather chicken business. Although white feather chickens and yellow feather chickens could make a lot of profit, they were ordinary chicken breeds after all, and the profit per chicken was limited. But the blood feather chicken was different. That day, at the Fuhu boxing gym, Zhang He heard the county magistrate tell him the price. A blood feather chicken cost 20 taels. If Zhang He could buy it from Chenjia village, the profit would definitely be enough to support his own martial arts training, and he could even make great strides forward in the martial arts. As they were talking, Su Jiwen and Zhang He had already reached a fork in the road. After saying goodbye to each other, Su Jiwen walked towards the wealthy area, while Zhang He returned to his temporary residence in Shishir. Brother Zhang, you're back? When Zhang Hai returned to the house, the skinny guy who lived with him came up to him and said worriedly, I saw you come back so late. I thought you had an accident. I'm Phoenix. Zhang He shook his head, went into the house, and sat down with Shouho, and then told him all about his experience today. After hearing this, Skinny Monkey showed a look of shock as expected. Brother Zhang, the Skinny Monkey's eyes flickered as he asked, is Chenjia village really that wealthy? Zhang He gave the Skinny Monkey a deep look and said in a deep voice, put aside your thoughts. We are now constables of the government, and we can't do those things of robbery. Zhang He discovered that ever since the incident of killing the entire Zhu family, his brothers had inevitably become a bit more vicious. Even Shouho, who used to be the most astute and rational person, was no exception. Once he heard that a family was rich, he would immediately have bad thoughts. Hearing Zhang He's scolding, the Skinny Monkey quickly dispelled the little thoughts in his mind. In fact, he just reacted instinctively. He didn't really want to rob Chenjia village, and he didn't have the ability to do so. It was not difficult to hear from Zhang He's description that Chun Dao was a person whom even the county magistrate and Li Guanju had to treat politely, and was not someone a skinny monkey like him could afford to provoke. Brother Zhang, do you want to do business in Chenjia village like that peddler named Wuhan? The Skinny Monkey, who had regained his senses, immediately understood Zhang He's inner thoughts. In fact, he had the same idea after listening to Zhang He's description. The reason was simple. They were really too poor. Just look at the house they live in. It is narrow and cramped, and has only one bedroom. 2 adult men can only sleep in one room. Zhang He and Shouho are still relatively lucky. Many of Zhang He's brothers have to live in one house with 7 or 8 people. It is so crowded that they have no place to stretch their legs when they sleep. Good. Zhang He nodded and said, although we have enough food and drink now, we are still not rich. Now that Chenjia village has such a good opportunity to make money, we must seize it. After saying that, Zhang He looked at Shouho and said, Shouho, I plan to let you do this business. What do you think? Among Zhang He's brothers, Shouho is definitely the smartest one and the most suitable person to do business. Of course I have no problem, but the Skinny Monkey frowned and said, then Chenjia village, are you willing to sell the chickens to us? I'll find a way to deal with this. Zhang He said so. The next day, just as the sky was getting light, Chun Fei, who was lying in bed, was awakened by Li Ping. Chun Fei, who was awakened from her sweet dream, rubbed her eyes and said incoherently, Nong, what are you doing? Get up quickly. Li Ping smiled and rubbed Chun Fei's head, saying, today is the first day of school. Don't be late. Is the school opening? Chun Fei then remembered that today was the day that Chun Dao and Li Zheng had agreed that the school would start classes. All the children in the village who wanted to learn to read and write needed to go to the school to listen to Li Zheng's lectures. Chun Fei did not have much resistance to studying. After all, she was not a child from China on Earth and had never been to school, so naturally she did not have any aversion to studying. On the contrary, Chun Fei was quite looking forward to going to school because the small school bag placed on her bedside. This is the cross-body school bag that Li Ping had sewn out of cotton cloth according to Chun Dao's instructions. Chun Fei jumped off the bed, put the school bag on her back, and said to Li Ping with a smile on her face, "Mom, does my new school bag look good?" Chapter 151, The Whole Village is Out. Looking at the conceited Chun Fei, Li Ping just smiled. Chun Dao walked into the room and said with a smile, "It looks great. Xiao Fei's new school bag is gorgeous." Elder brother. Chun Fei laughed and rushed towards Chun Dao, hugged Chun Dao's thigh and said, "Brother, I heard that after going to school, I can understand the books in the bag. Is this true?" When moving the books to the school yesterday, Chun Dao specially took a copy home and put it in Chun Fei's school bag. Chun Fei is at the age when curiosity is at its strongest, so naturally she couldn't help but open the book to check it out, but after reading it, Chun Fei's little face was confused. The words on it looked like heavenly books to her, and she couldn't understand any of them. "Of course it's true." Chun Dao stroked Chun Fei's hair and said with a smile, "Xiao Fei, you must learn to read well when you go to school." "Got it. I understand, brother. Okay, let's go." After Chun Fei washed up, she took her little hand and led her towards the school. At this time, there were already crowds of people outside Li Zheng's house, most of whom were adults with children. Obviously, the villagers attached great importance to reading. "Brother Dao is here? Is this your sister Xiao Fei? She's so cute. Xiao Fei is so plump. She looks healthier than my child. Xiao Fei has grown a lot taller recently. Brother Dao has grown a lot and looks like an adult." Seeing Chun Dao and Chun Fei coming over, the adults greeted them warmly. Chun Dao nodded to everyone, glanced at the crowd, and nodded secretly in his heart. There are a total of 103 households in Qinjia village. Excluding Chun Jin's family who was killed by him, there are still 102 households. At this moment, there are more than 100 children gathered outside Li Zheng's house. This shows that most of the villagers with children have sent their children here, and some families have even sent all their children here at once. These children are of different ages. Some are already over 10 years old. Some are about 10 years old like Chun Fei, and some are probably only 6 or 7 years old. Looking at this large group of children of different ages, Chun Dao couldn't help but feel a little amused, yet also a little helpless. In principle, these children of different ages should be divided into different schools, but unfortunately, Qinjia village does not have such conditions today, so all the children can only squeeze together to study. Squeak. At this moment, the door opened and Li Zheng walked out. He was startled when he saw the crowd outside, but then he quickly reacted and said, "Are you all here? Let's put the children in and start the class." Upon hearing this, the villagers gave their children some instructions and then sent them to the school. "Xiao Fei, listen carefully to Mr. Li and study hard when you get there." Chun Dao also said something to Chun Fei, and then let Chun Fei enter the school on his own. With the influx of hundreds of children, Li Zheng's home inevitably seemed a little crowded. Fortunately, when the school was built, the village chief Chun He's purpose was to provide a place for all the children in the village to study. Therefore, the space built in the school was very large, enough to accommodate these hundreds of children. After guiding the children to sit down in the classroom, Li Zheng began to distribute books to everyone. "Chingo, come and help me distribute the books." Li Zheng reached out and called the older Chingo over, asking him to help distribute the books in the school, and then began his teaching. "Everyone, open the first page of the book and read after me. The sky and earth are dark yellow. The universe is vast and boundless. The sky and earth are dark yellow. The universe is vast and boundless. The sun waxes and wanes, and the stars are spread out. The sun waxes and wanes, and the stars are spread out." In the school, the children's unorganized and somewhat unclear reading sounds were heard, and many adults who were still waiting in front of Li Zheng's house immediately smiled. Even the corners of Chun Dao's mouth rose slightly. No matter in what era, children are a symbol of hope. Now that the children of Qinjia village have started to go to school, everything is moving in a good direction. Time passed quietly, and before we knew it, it was October. On this day, in mid-October, Chun Lian woke up early and helped her grandmother, He Shuhua, to the house. He Shuhua usually rarely goes out, but today is an exception, because today is the day when Chun Dao gives money to everyone in Qinjia village. Everyone had been looking forward to the silver that Chun Dao mentioned for a long time, and everyone was looking forward to this day. Xiao Yin, Grandma He, let's go together. Chun Lian, who was walking on a small road in the village, happened to meet Wu Yun, who was going out, so the three of them gathered together, wrapped their clothes tightly, and walked towards Chun Dao's house. Although the clothes they wore did not provide much warmth, the slight chill could not dispel the passion in the three people's hearts. Not only them, but every villager in Chunjia village who walked out of their home had a warm smile on their face. Today is the day that Dao Gu'er agreed to distribute the money. Xiaoyan, have you thought about how to use the money? Wu Yun asked with a smile. I haven't decided yet. Chun Lian shook her head and said, I plan to save this money for the time being. Chun Lian worked in Qin Dao's house for a month and was paid 1 tael of silver. Together with the rent for the land, he could get a total of 3 taels of silver. With such a large sum of money, Chun Lian really didn't know how to spend it for a while. Aunt Wu, how do you plan to use this money? Chun Lian looked at Wu Yun and asked, I'm going to buy some new clothes for myself and my child. Wu Yun seemed to have a plan in mind and said without hesitation, also, I will buy some meat for my children and save the rest of the money for the time being. Fina. Chun Lian smiled and nodded. At this time, they had already arrived outside Qin Dao's house. However, they found that they were already quite late. Outside Qin Dao's house, there were crowds of people, as if the whole village had come out. In fact, the entire village was mobilized. Except for the elderly and children who could not move, almost everyone in the village gathered in front of Qin Dao's house. Every one of the villagers waiting outside Qin Dao's house had a joyful smile on their face. The money will be distributed today. Have you thought about how to spend it? I plan to buy some cloth and ask my wife to make some new clothes for the children. I have this plan too. It's too cold today. I really can't do without new clothes. I plan to buy more food to store at home. In this weather, we really can't live without food. We have rice, brother. Why are you worrying about food? In my opinion, you should buy more meat. Yes, I'm going to buy some meat too. I haven't tasted meat in a year. The villagers were discussing how they would use the money after receiving it, and everyone had a beautiful vision on their face. Chapter 152, So Much Money. Squeak. The door of Chun Dao's house opened, and every villager's eyes flashed with a fiery light. Brother Dao, have you started distributing money? Good morning, Brother Dao. Brother Dao, when will the money be distributed? Looking at the anxious faces of the villagers, Chun Dao smiled and said, Don't worry, everyone. After saying that, Chun Dao looked at Li Zheng in the crowd and said, Mr. Li and the village chief, come and help. Li Zheng and Chun He nodded, walked out of the crowd, and entered the front yard of Qin Dao's house, but saw that a table had been set up in the yard of Qin Dao's house, and on the table was a plate of silver. The silver beans were sparkling with an attractive luster under the not-too-bright sunlight of winter. That's a lot of silver. With so much money, Brother Dao's family must be really rich. If you give me all this money, I won't have to worry about anything in my life. The villagers' eyes lit up when they saw the silver through the gate of Qin Dao's house, and they were completely relieved. Before this, they were still a little worried that Qin Dao would not be able to pay the money, but now they no longer have this worry. Seeing so much silver there makes people feel at ease. The village chief will be in charge of distributing the money later, and you, Mr. Li, will be in charge of taking the names. Qin Dao pointed to the paper and pen on the other side of the table and said, Write down the names of every villager who received money to avoid duplication. Understood. Li Zheng nodded, sat behind the table, grabbed the brush, and stood ready. The village chief also stood in front of the table with a serious face, ready to start distributing money to the villagers. Qin Dao walked to the gate and said to the villagers outside, Okay, everyone line up and come up one by one to receive your money. As soon as Qin Dao finished speaking, the villagers immediately lined up and marched towards the front yard of Qin Dao's house, like a long dragon. Village chief, I'm here to collect the money. Mr. Chun, who was at the front of the line, said to Chun He with anticipation, The rent for my land is 2 taels of silver. Good. Chun He glanced at Qin Dao, and when he saw Qin Dao nod, he took out 2 taels of silver from the table behind him and handed it to Chun Sheng. Li Zheng wrote down the 4 words, Chun Sheng, 2 taels. Thank you, village chief. Thank you, Brother Dao. Chun Sheng was so happy when he got the silver that he couldn't stop smiling. He didn't delay the people behind him, but took the silver and left quickly with his wife Lu Jie and son Chen Go, as if they were holding a treasure, as if he was afraid of being targeted. At the same time, other villagers also came forward to collect the silver. Chun Zhong, 2 taels of silver. Chun Xiong, 2 taels of silver. Chun Jian, 2 taels of silver. Chun Lian, who was standing in the middle of the line, looked at the other villagers who were leaving after receiving the silver. She felt even more excited. She was different from the others. The others only had 2 taels of silver to rent the land at Qingdao, but she had 3 taels. 3 taels of silver was definitely the greatest fortune Chun Lian had ever possessed in her life. Even though she had not yet figured out how to use the money, she couldn't help but feel extremely excited at the thought of having 3 taels of silver in her pocket soon. Even he Xiuhua, who had been supported by Chun Lian, had anticipation in her eyes. For her family, 3 taels of silver was too important. Soon, it was Chun Lian's turn to collect the money. Looking at Chun He in front of him, Chun Lian said, "Village chief, I have 3 taels of silver in total." Hearing this, Chun He couldn't help but have a hint of envy in his eyes. Even as the village chief, he only had 2 taels of silver to rent the land, while Chun Lian had 3 taels, which made him very envious. "Xiaoyan, you are so lucky," Chun He said with some envy. "That's a full ounce of silver more than others. This is because Brother Dao thinks highly of me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to earn so much." As Chun Lian responded with a smile, Chun He had already taken 3 taels of silver from the plate behind him and handed it to Chun Lian. The moment Chun Lian took the silver, she felt the coolness in her palm and suddenly had the urge to cry for joy. For her, whose family was barely making ends meet, these 3 taels of silver seemed particularly heavy. With these 3 taels of silver, she would no longer have to worry about running out of food at home, and she would no longer have to let her grandmother, who was over 50 years old, eat bran and flour for every meal as before. Chun Lian turned around and was about to help her grandmother leave, then glanced at Chun Dao, who was standing not far away, with endless gratitude flashing in her eyes. At this moment, Chun Lian's gratitude towards Chun Dao reached its peak. It was Chun Dao who gave her a job that provided her with no worries about food and clothing, and it was also Chun Dao who completely changed her family's poor situation. "Brother Dao, thank you." Chun Lian helped He Xiuhua leave. The other villagers who were queuing at the back looked at Chun Lian's back, their envy evident in words. "This Lian's sister really made a lot of money. She made a full ounce of silver more than us. Isn't it?" The same goes for Wu Yun and the widows. Each of them can get 3 taels of silver. Brother Dao is so nice to them. "What are you talking about? Isn't Dao Gur good to us? Besides Dao Gur, who else would be willing to spend 2 taels of silver to rent our rotten land? Yes, our village has a Dao brother. It's really our luck." The long queue gradually shortened, and soon all the money was distributed to the villagers. Li Zheng stood up and stretched, then spread out the paper covered with words. He said to Chun Dao, "Brother Dao, I've written everything down. Can you check if there are any mistakes?" "Let me see." Chun Dao took a quick glance, confirmed there was no duplication, and said with a smile, "Thank you for your help, Mr. Li." After saying that, Chun Dao took a tael of silver from the table and stuffed it into Li Zheng's hand. "Mr. Li, this is the agreed teaching fee." Li Zheng obviously didn't expect Chun Dao to give him 1 or 2 taels of silver. He was stunned for a moment before accepting the silver. "Thank you, Brother Dao." Chun Dao waved his hand, took out another 2 taels of silver, and stuffed it into the hands of the village chief Chun He. "Village chief, this is your share." The village chief Chun He had just been busy distributing money to the villagers, and he had not received his own share yet. Chun Dao could not forget this. "Thank you, Brother Dao." Chun He grinned. Even for him, the village chief, 2 taels of silver was a huge fortune. Holding the silver in his palm and feeling its cool touch, Chun He asked, "Brother Dao, is there anything else? If not, I'll go back first." After receiving the silver, Chun He couldn't wait to go back and share his joy with his family, and had no intention of staying in Chun Dao's house for long. "It's okay for now. If the village chief has anything else to do, you can go back first." Chun Dao said that because today is the day to distribute money, the whole village will have a day off. In other words, the villagers do not need to work today and can celebrate with their families at home. Of course, because they didn't need to work, Chun Dao's family didn't prepare meals for the villagers. Chapter 153, Happy All Day. Chen He quickly left with the silver in his pocket, but Li Zheng stayed. He smiled and said, "The villagers will probably be happy all day today." Li Zheng was well aware of the stimulation that 2 taels of silver would bring to the villagers. Not to mention the villagers. Even he, a scholar, could hardly hold back his smile when he received 1 tael of silver from Chun Dao. "Mr. Li," Chun Dao said, "if you have nothing to do today, why not have a meal at my house?" Li Zheng thought about it and did not refuse. So he stayed at Chun Dao's house and had dinner with Chun Dao, Chun Sheng, and others. At the same time, Chun Lian, who helped Xue back to her house, carefully placed 3 taels of silver on the table. Looking at the glittering silver, Chun Lian's body trembled slightly, which was a manifestation of excitement. Chun Lian turned to look at Xue and found that Xue was also staring at the silver on the table without blinking. "Grandma, this silver is really beautiful." Xue nodded subconsciously. At this moment, the metallic luster on the silver was the most beautiful color in the world in their eyes. Brother Dao is really generous. Xue couldn't help but sigh. The 3 taels of silver her family could get were all earned by Chun Dao. Not only her family, but the whole village was the same. If it weren't for Chun Dao, how could the villagers have the opportunity to earn money? Being able to earn a penny is considered a skill. After sighing, Xue looked at Chun Lian and said, "Xiao Yin, what are you going to do with this money?" This money belongs to Chun Lian, and Xue does not intend to interfere with its use, but as an elder, she still wants to ask about where the money is used. "This is too much money. I haven't figured out what to do with it yet." Chun Lian said, "But I plan to buy a new set of clothes for Grandma, and I need to change my own clothes too. Now that the weather is getting colder, buying new clothes has become a need for most villagers, and Chun Lian is no exception." The clothes she and Xue wore were several years old. Not only were they heavily patched, but they also had very poor warmth retention. Every time they went out and the cold wind blew, they felt as if they were wrapped in the cold wind and shivered. Now that she had money, Chun Lian naturally considered buying some cloth to sew new clothes. "Also, I plan to buy some meat." Chun Lian licked the corner of her mouth. When she worked at Chun Dao's house before, she could occasionally eat a piece of meat. The aroma of the meat was unforgettable. Now that she had money, she wanted to buy more meat. "Buy meat?" Xue frowned and said, "In this season, there is no meat to sell in our village. I'm afraid we have to go to the city." In the past, during peaceful times, some villagers in Chunjia village would sell their livestock for money. However, with the cold disaster sweeping through the entire Chunjia village, there were almost no livestock to be seen. In this situation, Chunjia village naturally lost its source of meat. If they wanted to eat meat, they would probably have to go into the city. And Chun Lian, Xue, who watched Chun Lian grow from a child to a young girl, knew very well that Chun Lian had never been to the county town. "I know that." Chun Lian smiled and nodded. "I plan to go to the city with Dao Gur and the others in a few days." Chun Lian, who had never been to the county town, was very yearning for it because she often heard others bragging about its prosperity and bustle. When she talked about going to the city, there was a gleam in her eyes. "That's fine." Xue nodded. If it were anyone else, Xue would definitely not allow Chun Lian to go into the city with her. After all, Chun Lian was still a virgin, and traveling with a group of men would inevitably ruin her reputation. But with Chun Dao, Xue felt at ease. While Chun Lian and Xue were discussing the use of the silver, at Chun Go's home, the 3 members of the family who had returned home were also staring intently at the 2 taels of silver placed on the table by Mr. Chun. "This silver is really beautiful." Chun Go grinned and said, "I've lived for so many years, and I've never seen a whole ounce of silver." Upon hearing this, Chun Sheng and Lu Jian nodded in unison. Not to mention Chun Go, even they who were nearly 40 years old, had only seen a full tael of silver very few times. Even in peaceful years with a good harvest, they would not have seen such a large sum of money. After all, when the harvest is good, the price of grain is low. It is impossible to sell the grain produced by the few acres of land at home for a full tael of silver. To put it bluntly, for ordinary people in Xia country, copper coins are their most commonly used currency. As for silver, very few people can use it. At this moment, 2 taels of silver were placed in front of Chun Go and the other 2. Their eyes seemed to be glued to the silver, and they could not move their gazes at all. After a long while, Chunsheng finally withdrew his gaze and said proudly, "Brother Go, don't you want to eat meat? Dad will buy it for you tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Lu Jie couldn't help but feel a pang of pain on her face. Although she had never bought meat, she knew that the price of meat would definitely not be cheap in this year. Buying a meal of meat would at least take away a small half of the 2 taels of silver on the table. However, Mr. Chun was the one who made the decision after all, so she did not refute what he said. "I'm not going to eat meat." At this time, Chingo unexpectedly said, "Dad, we should use these 2 taels of silver to do other things." "Anything else?" Mr. Chin couldn't help but be a little surprised. Chungo, who had been shouting for meat before, actually didn't want to eat meat at this time, which was contrary to his usual behavior. "What's going on?" "Buying some cloth for new clothes," Lu Jie asked. Buying cloth was also part of her and Chunsheng's plan. After all, the weather was too cold now, and it would be difficult to survive without new clothes. "No." Chungo shook his head, thought for a moment, and said, "I think we should use these 2 taels of silver to make money." "How does this money make money?" Mr. Chun was even more confused. This money was not a woman. Could it be possible that it could produce new money? "Dad, listen to me." Chungo suddenly stood up and paced back and forth in the living room. As he walked back and forth, he said, "Dad, Mom, do you remember the peddler named Wuhan?" "Of course I remember." Chunsheng and Lu Jie nodded in unison. All the villagers in Qinjia village were very familiar with Wuhan. After all, most of the steamed buns eaten by the villagers in Qinjia village were made from the white flour brought by Wuhan. "Then do you know how much silver Wuhan can earn by transporting goods to the village?" Chingo asked again. Chunsheng and Lu Jie looked at each other and shook their heads. They worked in the fields every day and had little contact with Wuhan. Even if they met him occasionally, they would not have much communication with Wuhan. Naturally, they had no way of knowing how much money Wuhan could earn. Chapter 154, I will make you have many wives and concubines. Then Wuhan should come to our village and earn at least this much. Chingo spread out his 5 fingers and faced Chunsheng and Lu Jie. 500 copper coins? That's so much, Mr. Chun said subconsciously. Chungo rolled his eyes at his disappointing father and said, "It's not 500 copper coins, but 5 taels of silver." 5 taels of silver? That's a lot. Mr. Chun and Lu Jie both gasped. What does 5 taels of silver mean? Even though there were 2 taels of silver in front of them, they knew clearly that if Chun Dao had not been willing to help the villagers, they might not be able to save up these 2 taels of silver in 10 years. And Wuhan, just by transporting goods to Qinjia village, was able to earn more money than Chunsheng's family could save in 10 years. How could the 2 of them not be shocked? "Son, you are kidding us, right?" Lu Jie looked at Chungo in astonishment. How can there be such easy money in this world? She could earn 5 taels of silver in just one trip to Qinjia village. There was no gold mine buried underground in Qinjia village, so where could Wuhan get so much silver? "Why would I lie to you?" Chingo rolled his eyes at Lu Jie and said, "Wuhan told me this himself. It's absolutely true." After saying that, Chingo explained to the 2 of them, when Wuhan brings in grain, salt, and other supplies, Dao Gurur will pay him a little extra as profit. This is the first payment. Then, Wuhan will bring back Uncle Chin's chickens to the city to sell, and the profit earned from that is the second payment. In other words, Wuhan can earn at least 2 payments every time he comes to Qinjia village. These 2 payments combined are at least 5 taels. I see. Chunsheng and Lu Jie looked surprised, but at the same time, they were shocked. Because merchants had a relatively low status in Xia country, many people looked down on them and rarely cared about the profits they earned. It was not until this time that the 2 realized that they had completely underestimated the businessman and his ability to make money. "Dad, Mom, do you know why I mentioned Wuhan?" Chingo suddenly asked. "I don't know." Mr. Chun and Lu Jie were obviously not smart people and just shook their heads. Seeing this, Chingo couldn't help but sigh helplessly. How could such a smart child like him have such 2 parents with fish lips? "The reason I mentioned Wuhan is because," Chingo said helplessly, "if Wuhan can do business, we can do the same." Yes, this is what Chingo thought. In his opinion, if Wuhan, an outsider from a county town, can do Daojur's business, there is no reason why he, a villager of Qinjia village, cannot do it because he has a closer relationship with Chun Dao than Wuhan. Doing business requires capital, which is why Chungo rejected Chunsheng's suggestion to buy meat. He wanted to use the 2 taels of silver as capital for doing business. Business. Mr. Chen frowned and said, Brother Go, we have never done this business before. Can it succeed? Because Chun Go had mentioned Wuhan's profit relationship, Chen Sheng had no resistance to doing business. Although the status of merchants in Xia State was generally low, so what? As long as you have money, who would dare to look down on you? But Mr. Chun couldn't help feeling unsure. In his opinion, doing business was not an easy thing. He and his wife were farmers who worked the land for a living, and they couldn't do this at all. As for Chun Go, although he is a little clever, he has never been involved in business, so no one knows whether he can succeed. It's not difficult, Chun Go replied confidently. I heard from Wuhan that Uncle Chen's chickens are very popular. We just need to buy chickens from Uncle Chen and transport them to the East Market in the city to sell them. We can sell them quickly and make money. After saying that, Chun Go added, Of course, the most difficult part of doing this business is not how to sell the chickens, but how to transport them to the city. Hearing this, Chun Sheng and Lu Jie nodded in unison. These days, there are countless bandits on the official roads, and the road to the county town is full of dangers. Transporting goods is not an easy task, and you might even lose your life. Son, should we not do this business anymore? Lu Jie said worriedly, It's too dangerous on this official road right now. I don't want anything to happen to you. Don't worry, Mom. This isn't a problem at all. Chun Go patted his chest and said, Because I don't plan to do this business by myself, but to bring in other people from the village. As long as we have enough people, even the bandits in the forest won't dare to attack us easily. Chun Go longed for the county town and often chatted with Chun Si, Chun Jiang, and others who were going to the county town. Naturally, he also knew the character of the bandits on both sides of the official road who bullied the weak and feared the strong. In his opinion, as long as his cargo transportation team had enough young and strong people, those bandits would definitely not dare to attack him. Looking at Chun Go, who looked confident, Lu Jie still frowned. As a mother, she really didn't want to see her only son facing danger, even if the probability of the danger was very small. But when she saw the expression on Chun Go's face, Lu Jie still chose to remain silent. She knew her son very well and knew that once Chun Go made a decision, even she, as his mother, could not change his mind and persuasion would be in vain. Chen Sheng looked directly into Chun Go's eyes. Seeing Chun Go's calm and confident expression, he decided, In that case, I'll give you these 2 taels of silver. After saying that, Chun Sheng solemnly handed the 2 taels of silver to Chun Go. As a father, although Chen Sheng had no ability and could not make his family live a good life, he was willing to support his son's idea, even if his son's idea would drain the family's hard-earned silver. Chun Go accepted the 2 taels of silver with a serious look on his face and said, Don't worry, Dad. When I get my business up and running, you can live like a landlord at home. Then I'll give you a few concubines, so you can have a harem of wives and concubines. Mr. Chan shrank his head and glanced at Lu Jie beside him, knowing that something was going to happen. As expected, the next moment, Lu Jie shot up from her chair and slapped Chun Go on the forehead. Brother Go, have you become more capable? Are you still giving your father a concubine? Oh, I just said it casually, Mom. Don't take it seriously. Chun Go covered his head and ran around the house, but Lu Jie was not willing to give in. She took out a feather duster from somewhere and chased Chun Go and beat him up. I'll let you take a concubine for your father. I'll let you have many wives and concubines. Mom, I'm really just saying this. Stop hitting me. I'm going to break down if you keep hitting me. Are you still going to pay it? No more, no more. Snort. Chapter 155, Sweet as Pie. While Chun Go's house was in chaos, in Chun Sheng's house, Lu Yin, Chun Sheng, Chun Shi, and Chun Mu were sitting around a table, staring at the silver on the table in a daze. In the entire Qinjia village, the one who received the most silver from Chun Dao was Chun Sheng. In addition to the 2 taels of silver for renting the land, Chun Sheng also had an income from being a bodyguard for Chun Dao, which was also 2 taels of silver. Hiring a 9th-grade warrior as your bodyguard for 2 taels of silver is certainly not a high price. It can even be said to be extremely low. After all, a 9th-rank warrior is considered a well-known figure in the county. It is absolutely impossible to hire a 9th-rank warrior as a bodyguard without 5 to 10 taels of silver per month. Of course, Chun Sheng didn't know this. Even if he knew, he would only be grateful to Chun Dao, because Chun Dao not only ensured that he had enough to eat, but also helped him become a warrior by relying on the motivation provided by Chun Dao. In this case, let alone Chun Dao giving him 2 taels of silver. Even if he didn't give him any money, Chun Chung would be happy to accept it. At this moment, Chun Chung, his mother, and 2 younger brothers were sitting at the table, looking at the 4 taels of silver on the table. In his pupils, the silver, the cold light, and the joy complemented each other. "Mom, what are we going to do with this money?" Chenmu looked at his mother Lu Yan with hope, hoping that she would say something like buy some meat, but Lu Yan's answer was obviously not what Chenmu expected. "Use some of this money to make new clothes for the 3 little ones, and as for the rest." Lu Yan thought for a moment and said, "Keep the remaining money for you to marry." Lu Yan's husband, the father of Chun Chung and others, has been gone for several years. Even his voice, appearance, and smile have gradually become blurred in Lu Yan's memory. But there is one thing that Lu Yan has never forgotten, and that is to carry on the Chun family's lineage. Ever since her husband left, raising her children and continuing the family line has become Lu Yan's only wish. In the past, her family did not have the conditions to marry off her 3 grown-up children, but now, the 4 taels of silver on the table gave Lu Yan hope. Getting a wife? Chun Chung and the other 2 looked at each other. Chun Cheng's expression didn't change much, but Chun Shi and Chen Mu's eyes lit up. They were both over 20 years old. In Xia country, where it was common for people to get married at the age of 14 or 15, they were definitely late marriages. As for the issue of marriage, the 2 have thought about it many times. Even if we don't mention physical desires, a life with a wife and children in a warm bed is the dream of most rural men of this era. However, due to their poor family conditions, the 2 of them could only hide this idea in their hearts. When they suddenly heard that their mother was going to find them a wife, they became excited. "Mom, are you really going to tell us about your wife?" Chun Shi asked with shining eyes, as if he couldn't help imagining the scene of himself falling asleep in his arms with his adorable wife every day after getting married. "Certainly." Lu Yan nodded and said, "I've already thought about it. From these 4 taels of silver, I'll use 1 tael to buy cloth for new clothes, and the remaining 3 taels will be used to propose marriage to the 3 of you." Although the cost of getting married in Xia country is far less than that in China, where Chen Dao lived in his previous life, it is still quite expensive, whether it is matchmaking or the subsequent betrothal gifts and wedding expenses. Of course, ordinary people are not so particular. They just need to give some money to the matchmaker and some betrothal gifts to the girl's family. The 3 taels of silver that Lu Yan took out are definitely more than enough. "Very good." Chen Mu cheered, then frowned and said, "But mother, is there really anyone willing to marry into our family?" Upon hearing this, Lu Yan looked at the environment inside her own house and frowned. Her family's conditions were not good. Even the room where her children lived had to be shared by several people. Once the woman knew about this situation, she might not be willing to marry into their family. After all, after getting married, the couple must have a wedding house for them to live in, right? "But my family cannot provide such a house. Let's try it." Lu Yan sighed. In this situation, she could only try to find matchmaker. "Brother Dao, Brother Dao." The front door of Chun Dao's house, which had just been deserted, became lively again. A large number of villagers gathered outside the door and shouted at the house. "What's wrong?" Because Chun Lian and others had a day off today, Chun Dao, who had to feed the chickens and ducks himself, walked to the front yard and looked at the villagers gathered outside with a puzzled look on his face. In his opinion, these villagers who received the money should celebrate at home. Why did they come to his home? They couldn't be expecting his family to provide them with meals, right? "Brother Dao, we want to ask when you will come into the city." "Yes, we want to go to the city too, and we want to go with you, Daojia." "Brother Dao, take me with you into the city." From the noisy responses, Chun Dao could barely hear the purpose of the villagers' visit. It turned out that after the villagers returned home, they all started discussing the use of the silver with their families without exception. However, after discussing it over and over again, they could not avoid one topic, which was going to the city. There was no doubt that supplies were scarce in the rural areas of Xia State. Whether it was salt, cloth, or other daily necessities, they had to be purchased in the city. In that year, going into the city was undoubtedly a dangerous thing. So the villagers came to Chun Dao's house one after another and asked when Chun Dao would go into the city so that they could go with him. Looking at the expectant faces of the villagers, Chun Dao, who had no plans to go to the city in recent days, thought for a moment and said, "I don't have any plans to go to the city recently. You can ask Uncle for help." As Chun Dao fell, Chun Dao also heard the noise here. He had just walked out of the house and immediately met the enthusiastic gazes of the villagers. You guys are going into town? Chinda asked. That's right. Chinda, when are you going into the city? We'll go with you. How about tomorrow? I'm in a hurry to buy some cloth to make clothes for my wife at home. Me too. My kids are complaining about being cold every day, and I really can't do without making them new clothes. The villagers were talking at once, their faces full of anticipation. Chinjiao village was remote, and many people had never been to the city. However, they had heard that there was a serious problem of banditry on the official road, so they were inevitably a little nervous and needed an experienced person like Chunda to lead the team. Everyone, don't worry. Chunda motioned for everyone to be quiet for a moment, then walked over to Qindao and said in a low voice, Brother Dao, wouldn't it be unsafe for me to be alone? Although Chunda is a good archer, he is still an ordinary person. If he encounters bandits, he may not be able to protect himself. In the past, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and help the village go to the county town to buy supplies. But now, Chunda doesn't want to take the risk anymore. Especially after encountering bandits twice on the official road, Chunda no longer dared to say that he could protect everyone's safety. After all, there are dozens of bandits, and he, Chunda alone, was unable to withstand so many bandits. Chapter 156, it's done. Qindao could probably guess what Chunda was worried about. He smiled and said, Don't worry, uncle. I'll arrange for Air Huang to go with you. After hearing this, Chunda felt relieved. Da Huang and Air Huang were both dogs equivalent to 8th grade warriors. Qindao had told him this. With Air Huang's protection, Chunda felt that the safety of himself and the villagers would no longer be a problem. Then, Chunda turned to the villagers and said, If you want to go to the city, you can go with me tomorrow morning, but Chunda glanced at the large number of villagers and frowned. There are so many of you. There's no room in the car. The only means of transportation in the village is the donkey cart of the village chief, and it is obvious that so many people cannot sit on the donkey cart. In addition, the goods purchased by the villagers will also be a big problem. With so many people buying things, the donkey cart definitely cannot accommodate them. Don't worry, Chunda, we could just walk. I heard it's only about 10 miles to the county town, so we can definitely walk there. Yeah, we don't have anything, but we have a lot of strength. The villagers were not worried at all about the problem that Chunda was worried about. Farmers these days lack everything except the endurance to endure hardship. It was only a dozen miles from Chinjiao village to the county town, which was not difficult at all for the villagers. As for how to transport the things I bought, of course I carried them back by myself. Become. Seeing the villagers' reaction, Chunda nodded and said, Let's set off tomorrow morning. Anyone who wants to go to the city to buy things should gather at the village entrance early. We must have been waiting at the village entrance long ago. The villagers soon dispersed with smiles on their faces. Chunda also said hello to Qindao and returned home. Qindao came to the backyard of his home and looked at the chickens and ducks raised there. After this period of breeding, the number of chickens and ducks in the backyard has increased. The number of chickens has exceeded 700, and the rate of increase is still increasing every day. The number of ducks has also exceeded 100, which means the total number of poultry in Qindao's family has exceeded 800. Standing at the backyard gate, all he could hear were the endless sounds of chickens and ducks. If Qindao had heard this sound before his rebirth, he would have definitely found it noisy, but now Qindao only found it pleasant. In 2 or 3 days, I'm afraid the number of chickens and ducks will exceed 1,000. Qindao muttered to himself, frowning slightly. When his family built the house before, he had asked Shun Sheng and others to build the backyard as big as possible, but he still underestimated the reproduction speed of yellow-feathered chickens. Now there are 800 chickens and ducks in the backyard, and it already feels crowded. Looks like we need to build bigger chicken and duck farms soon. Qindao murmured. As the number of chickens and ducks increased, larger chicken and duck farms that could accommodate more chickens and ducks became an urgent matter. After all, you can't always keep these chickens and ducks in your backyard. No matter how big your backyard is, it may not be able to accommodate the chickens and ducks that keep breeding. Just when Qindao was considering building a larger chicken farm, Qinsheng had already appeared at Qinzhang's house. Brother Go, why are you here? Qinzhang opened the door and was surprised to see Qin Go standing outside. He had just returned from Chen Dao's house with his parents, and then Chen Go knocked on his door. Brother Jiang, I have something to discuss with you. Then come in. Chen Go, who was led into the house by Chen Jiang, immediately saw Chen Jiang's father Chen Wang and mother Jiang Miao sitting inside. Obviously, the 3 of them were talking in the house just now. Why did Brother Go come to our place? Seeing Chun-go coming in, Chun-wang couldn't help but ask in surprise. Chun-go was still a child, and children were often very afraid of adults, so Chun-go rarely took the initiative to visit other people's homes. Uncle Wang, Aunt Wang. Chun-go first politely greeted the two adults, then said, "I came here because I have something to discuss with you." "What's up?" The three of them looked at Chun-go together. Facing the gazes of the three people, Chun-go was inevitably a little restrained, but he still spoke clearly. "I'm planning to do some business, and I want to find your family as a partner." "Business?" Chun Wang and Jiang Miao looked at each other in bewilderment. For two of them who had spent most of their lives farming, doing business was truly too far-fetched. Of course, what surprised them even more was, this matter actually came from the mouth of Chun-go, a half-grown child. "Brother Go, what business are you going to do?" Although Chun Wang felt it was unreliable, he still asked. "Of course, it's business in our village." Speaking of this, Chun-go became excited and hurriedly took out the rhetoric he used at home and repeated it to Chun Wang and the other two. After listening to this, Chun Wang and the other two looked thoughtful. If this business is really as easy to do as Chun-go said, then it is not impossible to do this business. Uncle Wang, seeing the three people's interest, Chun-go struck while the iron was hot and said, "I've heard from Wuhan before that the chickens raised by Uncle Chun and Brother Dao are very popular in the city. As long as we transport them to the city, we won't have to worry about not making money. This is a business that is guaranteed to make money." Chun Wang and Jiang Miao nodded unconsciously, and Chun Jiang echoed, "Go Guer is right. The chickens raised by Dao Guer and Uncle Chun will never have trouble selling in the city." Chun Jiang, who often followed Chun Da and Chun Dao into the city, naturally had more say on this point than Chun-go. He knew very well that what Chun-go heard from Wuhan was not false. "I see." Chun Wang pondered for a while, then made a decision. "Then let's give this business a try." Although Chun Wang was a farmer, he wasn't so foolish as to refuse to make money right in front of him. So he said to Jiang Miao, "Wife, take out some of the copper coins we have saved at home. Tomorrow I'll go to the city to buy some cloth to make new clothes. As for the 2 taels of silver, don't touch them for now. Keep them for my business with Go-go." After saying that, Chun Wang looked at Chun-go and said, "Brother Go, how many people do you plan to find to join this business?" "The more the merrier," Chun-go said without hesitation. "The official road to and from the county town is not safe. If there are fewer people, it might be dangerous." Chun Wang nodded appreciatively and said, "Okay, then go and get started. When you start this business, just come over and let us know." "Good." Chun-go did not stay long, and soon went to the homes of young and strong people, such as Chun Si and Chun Zhong, to contact one partner after another. Chun-go was busy until the evening before he walked out of the last family's house. "It's done." Chun-go's eyes were as bright as stars as he walked on the village path. After his persuasion, a total of 10 families agreed to do business with him in partnership. These 10 families all had young and strong families who could provide guard for the caravan. Chapter 157 Matchmaking. We already have enough partners. The next step is to find Brother Dao and Uncle Chun. Chun-go looked up at the sky and did not choose to disturb Chun Dao and the others now. Instead, he chose to return home first to report the good news to his father and mother. The next day, as soon as the sky brightened, the entrance of Chunjia village was crowded with people. The villagers all looked happy and talked with smiles on their faces in the cold weather. "Brother, what are you family planning to buy in the city?" "I plan to buy some cloth and cut some meat for my child to nourish his body." "That's what I was planning to do too. I was also planning to buy some salt because we're almost out of salt at home." The villagers laughed and talked with others about the supplies they had purchased. At this time, Chun had already driven over in a donkey cart. Seeing Chunda coming, everyone surrounded him. "Chunda, have you set off yet?" "Uncle Chun, shall we leave now?" "Uncle Chun, let's go." Facing the eager gazes of the crowd, Chunda glanced at Huang on the donkey cart and waved his hand, saying, "Let's go." So the donkey cart started slowly and went onto the official road. On both sides of the donkey cart were a large number of villagers. Due to the limited number of people that could ride on the donkey cart, most villagers could not ride on the donkey cart and could only rely on a pair of iron feet to walk to the county town. Of course, the villagers didn't care about this. They walked on the official road with smiles on their faces, talking to people around them as they walked, and they were quite happy. Just when most of the villagers were heading to the county town, Lu Yin also walked out of Chun Cheng's house and headed towards Chun Dao's house. "Aunt Lu, why are you here?" Chun Dao, who had just opened the front gate, looked at Lu Yin, who was waiting outside in surprise. As far as he knew, most of the villagers would go out of town today, and the remaining few would take care of the wheat in the fields under the command of the village chief Chun He. It seemed a bit strange that Lu Yin suddenly came to the door at this time. Chun Cheng hasn't arrived yet, but his mother Lu Yin came first. Could something have happened to Chun Cheng? Just when Chun Dao was having a bad thought, Lu Yin spoke up. "Brother Dao, I'm here to find Sister Ping." When facing Chun Dao, Lu Yin's face was full of smiles, and there was a hint of gratitude in her smile. For her family, Chun Dao is definitely the biggest benefactor. It was Chun Dao who gave him the opportunity to have enough food to eat. It was also Chun Dao who made their family wealthy and gave them spare money to find wives for their 3 children. "Looking for my mother?" Chun Dao was a little surprised, but he still led Lu Yin into the house and immediately shouted towards the kitchen. "Mom, Cheng Er's mother is looking for you." "Here I come." Li Ping, her hands still stained with flour, came out of the kitchen into the living room and looked at Lu Yin and said, "Sister Lu, are you looking for me?" "Ping Mei." Lu Yin smiled and nodded, then said, "I'd like you to help me find a match." "Matchmaking?" Chun Dao, who was standing aside, was stunned. It was then that he remembered that his mother also had a job as a matchmaker. It may sound a bit ridiculous to say that Li Ping is a matchmaker. After all, Li Ping's eloquence is just average. She doesn't have the ability to make the dead come alive. She doesn't look like a matchmaker at all. But in fact, Li Ping was indeed a matchmaker before. As for the reason why Li Ping could become a matchmaker, it was very simple, because she was from Xiao village. Although the people of Xia State did not know the underlying logic of the harms of inbreeding, they knew that close relatives could easily give birth to unhealthy children. Therefore, among the villagers of Chunjia village, it is rare for men and women in the village to form a pair. The men in the village basically marry girls from other villages, and the girls in the village also marry to other villages. In this case, Li Ping, who married from Xiaohe village, has a natural advantage as a matchmaker. Because of the identity of Xiaohe village, Li Ping will naturally gain the trust of the villagers when she goes to Xiaohe village to propose marriage, and the success rate of matchmaking will be greatly increased. In fact, there are many young couples in the village, all of whom were brought together by Li Ping herself. Li Ping used to rely on her profession as a matchmaker to raise Chun Dao and Chun Fei. However, in recent years, as the villagers' lives became difficult, fewer and fewer people came to Li Ping for matchmaking and even disappeared completely. This led to Chun Dao forgetting Li Ping's identity. Matchmaking? Li Ping was also stunned for a moment and said, "Sister Lu, are you planning to be a matchmaker for Cheng'er?" Chun Cheng is over 25 years old. In Xia country, where early marriage is common, he could be described as an older bachelor. In fact, when Chun Cheng was working at home before, Li Ping asked Chun Cheng in a joking tone whether she wanted to find him a wife. Chun Cheng just scratched his head and smiled, and seemed not to have such an idea. But now it seems that Chun Cheng did have this idea. He was just too shy to say it out loud. "Look, Chun Cheng's mother came here now. It's not just Cheng Ji," Lu Yin replied. "My brothers Shi and Mu are also looking for wives." After saying that, Lu Yin took out 3 taels of silver from her pocket and said, "Ping Mei, this is the money I prepared. Do you think it's enough?" "Sister Lu, what are you doing? Hurry and put the money away." Li Ping hurriedly pushed back the silver that Lu Yin had thrust into her. "Your brother Cheng works so hard in my house. How could I possibly accept your matchmaking money? Put the money away quickly." In the past, Li Ping would charge some money or food for matchmaking, but now the family has enough food and drink, and Chun Cheng is Chun Dao's bodyguard, and he works diligently at home. How could she have the nerve to accept money from Lu Yin? What's more, Li Ping also knew something about Chun Cheng's family situation, and knew that Chun Cheng's family was not wealthy, so she felt even more embarrassed to accept Lu Yin's money. Looking at the silver that Li Ping pushed back, Lu Yin couldn't help but feel moved. Chun Dao's family had been really kind to them. Not only did they have enough food to eat, they also gave Cheng Gu'er a job that earned him 2 taels of silver a month. They even refused to accept money from matchmaking. At this moment, Lu Yin only felt that Chun Dao's family was definitely the best people to her family, except for her deceased husband. "Sister Lu," Li Ping added, "you can keep this money for your wedding. As for the wife," Li Ping frowned, thought for a moment, and said, I'm going Xiao village right now, and I'm sure to find beautiful wives for your 3 boys. Li Ping was also a decisive person. After she finished speaking, she immediately set off for Xiao village. Chun Dao hurriedly stopped her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and said, "Don't worry, Mom. It's not too late to have breakfast first." Li Ping then realized that she was a little hungry, so she turned around and said to Lu Yin, "Sister Lu, since you're here, why don't you have a meal at our house before going back?" Chapter 158 Delicate Chin Cheng. No. However, Lu Yin just shook her head like a rattle. Li Ping didn't even take the matchmaking money, so how could she feel comfortable staying at Chin Dao's house and eating for free? Despite Li Ping's repeated attempts to persuade her, Lu Yin refused Li Ping's invitation to stay for dinner and hurried back home. When Lu Yin returned home, the 3 brothers Chun Cheng, Chun Shi, and Chun Mu were already sitting at the dining table. In addition, several underage brothers and sisters were also sitting next to them, looking at the food on the table and swallowing their saliva. The food at Chin Cheng's house today was really good. There was a big bowl of noodles on the table. This was the white flour that Chun Dao gave to Chun Cheng a while ago. The amount of white flour was not much, only about 5 or 6 pounds, but Lu Yin had never been willing to eat it. Instead, she saved it and only took it out today and asked the 3 brothers to make noodles and cook them. Why hasn't Mother come back yet? Chunshi looked outside the door anxiously. The aroma of the noodles on the table seemed to have no attraction for him at all. Aunt Li wouldn't be unwilling to arrange a marriage for us, would she? Chun Mu said with a worried look on his face. They all knew that Lu Yin had gone to ask Li Ping to act as a matchmaker for them, and they were extremely keen on getting married, so they had been concerned about this matter. Don't worry, Chun Cheng comforted the 2 and said, Aunt Li is a reasonable person and will definitely not refuse. Chun Cheng was very confident about this. Working in Chun Dao's family, he knew Li Ping's personality very well. He knew that Li Ping was an easygoing person and would not refuse his mother's matchmaking request. It was even possible that she would not even use the money his mother brought. Mom is back. But at this moment, the youngest Chunya called out, and everyone looked outside the door, only to see Li Ping hurriedly walking into the room. Mom, what's going on? Mom, did Aunt Li agree? Seeing Lu Yin coming back, Chun Shi and Chun Mu immediately stood up and went forward to ask. Don't worry. Lu Yin gestured for them to sit down, then she sat down next to Chun Cheng and said, Brother Dower's mother has agreed. She will go to Xiaohe village to propose marriage to you later. Upon hearing this, Chun Shi and Chun Mu showed a look of relief on their faces. As long as Li Ping agreed, it would be great. In this way, we will have a great chance of getting married. Thinking of this, smiles suddenly appeared on the faces of the 2 people, as if they could not help but start imagining the days of living in a warm bed with a wife and children after marriage. Chun Cheng said, Mom, did Aunt Li confiscate your money? How do you know? Lu Yin looked at Chun Cheng in surprise. Guess. Chun Cheng said, Brother Dao's family is not short of money, and Aunt Li is not a petty person, so she will definitely not accept your money. Hearing this, Lu Yin couldn't help but take a deep look at her eldest son. Although this child looked honest and even a little silly, his mind was extremely delicate. No money. Chun Mu and Chun Shi looked at each other, finding it hard to believe that these people would do matchmaking for free. Brother Dower and his family are really good to us. Li Ping sighed and looked at Chun Cheng and said, Cheng, you've seen how good Dower's family is to us. You must be attentive when doing things for Dower's family in the future, okay? I know. Chun Cheng nodded heavily. Although he seldom spoke, he always remembered all the kindness Chun Dao had shown him. If it weren't for Chun Dao, Chun Cheng would still be hungry at this time. How could he have eaten every meal and even have enough spare money to marry a wife? You too. Lu Yin looked at Chun Shi and Chun Mu again. When you help Dao Guer with work in the village in the future, you must be diligent and attentive, otherwise I will not forgive you. Upon hearing this, Chun Shi and Chun Mu nodded like chicks pecking at rice. The Chun Dao family was like their benefactors to them, and they did not dare to show any disrespect towards them. The sun gradually rose higher. After breakfast, Chun Dao took Chun Fei's hand and sent her to school. After saying something to Ding Xiaohua, Li Ping went straight out, walked through the busy farmland, and headed towards Xiaohe village. Aunt Li, are you going back to visit your relatives? Sister Li, are you going to Xiaohe village? Sister Ping, good morning. In the farmlands of Chanja village, since most of the men and the families went to the county town to buy supplies, most of the people in the farmlands were women doing work like watering the crops. When they saw Li Ping walking through the farmlands, they all greeted her enthusiastically. Li Ping also waved in response to everyone, and then passed through the farmlands of Chinjia village and Xiao village and entered the territory of Xiao village. Let's go to Big Brother's house first. Standing at the border of Xiao village, Li Ping thought about it and decided to go to Li Dayton's house to find Feng Xiang to find out the situation. She hadn't been to Xiao village for a long time and didn't know the situation there. She also didn't know which family had a daughter waiting to get married, so she could only find someone who knew the situation. Following her memory, Li Ping came to Li Dayton's house and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" Feng Xiang's familiar voice came from inside the door. Li Ping immediately responded loudly, "Sister-in-law, I am Li Ping. Here I come." With a creak, the door of Li Dayton's house opened. Feng Xiang looked at Li Ping outside with joy. "Little sister, why are you here? Come in quickly, it's cold outside." As she spoke, Feng Xiang welcomed Li Ping into the house, poured her a cup of hot water, and then asked, "Little sister, Dayton is not at home today." As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Xiang realized that she had said nonsense. The matter of Li Daibing and Li Feng going to the county town to learn how to do business was arranged personally by Li Ping's son Dao Ge. Li Ping must know about this. As expected, Li Ping immediately said, "Sister-in-law, I'm not here to look for my brother. I just came to see you and to help find a marriage for someone." Proposed marriage? Feng Xiang was stunned for a moment, and the memory that had been buried in her mind resurfaced. She said in surprise, "Little sister, don't you already help people with matchmaking?" Feng Xiang knew that Li Ping used to act as a matchmaker. She even informed Li Ping about the situations of many girls waiting to get married in Xiao village. However, in recent years, Li Ping had given up this business. The reason was very simple. Every household was unable to eat enough, so who had the spare money to hire a matchmaker to arrange marriages? The cost of marrying a wife is not small these days. When the coal disaster swept across Qingzhou, few ordinary people could afford the cost of marrying a wife. Of course, the villagers of Qinjia village are now living a much better life. Some of them have some spare money, so it's normal for them to ask Li Ping to propose marriage, but Feng Xiang was a little confused. Li Ping's family was not short of money or food and clothing, so she could just stay at home and be a wealthy mistress. There was no need for her to go back to her old job and continue to act as a matchmaker, right? Chapter 159, Three Tales of Silver? I didn't charge any money this time. Li Ping smiled and said, "Do you remember Cheng, the man who worked at my house?" "Remember." Feng Xiang nodded. Chun Cheng was the kind of person who was easy to impress others. After all, he was 1.8 meters tall, which really made him stand out in Chanja village where most men were no taller than 1.7 meters. As for Chun Cheng's job in Chun Dao's house, Feng Xiang had known about it before. He served as Chun Dao's bodyguard, responsible for protecting Chun Dao's safety. Cheng Er's mother just found me, Li Ping said. She wanted me to find wives for Cheng Gur and his two younger brothers. I thought Cheng Gur was very hardworking when he was working at home, so I confiscated her money. Is that so? Feng Xiang suddenly realized that this could explain why Li Ping returned to her old job. It seemed that she was acting as a matchmaker for her own employees. "Sister-in-law, do you know anything about the unmarried girls in our Xiao village?" Li Ping asked. "Let me think about it." Feng Xiang pondered for a moment and said, "Not far from our home, there are two daughters of the Zhao Kong family who are ready to get married. We can go and ask them." Zhao Kang's family? A face of a middle-aged man emerged in Li Ping's mind. The Zhao Kong that Feng Xiang mentioned lived not far from Li Dayton's house. Li Dayton's house was where Li Ping lived before she married into Qinjia village. Therefore, she knew Zhao Kong. When she was younger, Li Ping even called Zhao Kong Brother Zhao. "Right," Feng Xiang said. "Zhao Kong has two daughters, Zhao Xiaoyun and Zhao Xiaomei. I've seen them both. They're not bad looking and very hardworking. They're perfect wives for Cheng Gur and his family." Li Ping nodded subconsciously. In her impression, Zhao Kong was a hardworking and honest middle-aged man. The daughter raised by such a man would definitely not have a bad temper. So Li Ping said, "Sister-in-law, let's go to Brother Zhao's house and ask." Become. The two got up and left the house. After walking along the path in front of the door for a while, they appeared in front of the house. "This is Zhao Kang's home." Feng Xiang went forward and knocked on the door. Soon, a voice came from inside the door. "Who is it?" Brother Kong, I'm Feng Xiang from Li Dayden's family. I have something to talk to you about. Squeak. The door opened, revealing Zhao Kang's somewhat old face behind the door. In Li Ping's memory, Zhao Kong had always looked young, but the Zhao Kong in front of her was quite different from her impression. He had an old demeanor and wrinkles on his face. He looked more like a weathered old man than a middle-aged man in his early 40s. Feng Xiang. Zhao Kong first glanced at Feng Xiang in confusion. Then his gaze fell on Li Ping. He asked in surprise, "You are Xiao Ping?" Before Li Ping got married, the two families lived very close to each other. Zhao Kong knew Li Ping and could even be said to be quite familiar with her. However, in recent years, he had rarely seen Li Ping return to the village. It was inevitable that he was a little surprised to see Li Ping suddenly appear at this moment. "Brother Zhao." Li Ping responded with a smile. Feng Xiang said, "Brother Kong, why don't you invite us in and have a seat?" Zhao Kong reacted immediately after hearing this and said hurriedly, "Come in and sit inside. It's cold outside." Zhao Kong welcomed the two men into the house, and at the same time called his wife Li over and asked her to pour some water for the two men. "Sister Li, don't bother anymore." Li Ping stopped Li and said straight to the point, "I came here this time to discuss marriage." Proposed marriage? Zhao Kong and Li were stunned, as if they had not expected that someone would come to propose marriage in this day and age. At the same time, there were rustling sounds coming from the bedroom next door. Zhao Kang's two daughters who lived in the bedroom hurriedly put their ears against the wall to eavesdrop on the sounds coming from the living room. "Xiao Ping, who are you going to propose to?" Zhao Kong came back to his senses and asked. His two daughters were no longer young and had reached the age to get married. They had not been able to get married before due to various reasons. When they suddenly heard Li Ping coming to propose marriage, they couldn't help but be interested. "To the boy from Chunjia village." Li Ping smiled and said, "There's a family in our village with 3 unmarried men. So their mother came to me and asked me to find them some wives in Xiao village. So I came to your house, Brother Zhao." 3 men have no wives. Zhao Kong and Li couldn't help but frown. There were 3 adult males in the family, but none of them had married. It was difficult for the two of them not to doubt the economic conditions of the family that Li Ping mentioned. Although Zhao Kang's family was in very poor financial condition and they couldn't even get enough to eat, when it came to marrying his daughter, they always had to consider the man's financial condition. Otherwise, his daughter would suffer completely if she married him. "Ping Mei, what are the conditions of this family?" Li asked calmly. Generally, Li Ping was clearly not a smooth-talking matchmaker. She simply spoke the truth. The adult males in that family are named Chun Cheng, Chun Shi, and Chun Mu. Their father died young, and their mother, Lu Yin, raised them. Life wasn't easy for them in the past, but things have improved a lot recently, and they have some savings. "Brother Zhao, your daughter will definitely have a good life if she marries one of them. My father died young, and my family was poor." After listening to Li Ping's story, Zhao Kong and the others almost immediately attached these 2 labels to Chun Cheng's family. If their daughter married into such a family, it would probably be difficult for her to live a good life. "Don't worry, Brother Kong." Feng Xiang seemed to notice the expressions of the 2 people and said at the right time, "Life in Chunjia village is very good now. Every household can eat enough. If your daughter marries there, she will enjoy a happy life." Feng Xiang said this with extreme seriousness, without any deception in her mind. In her opinion, Chunjia village was now living a good life that even Xiao village chief Li Chong envied. But Zhao Kong and Li obviously didn't quite believe it. Because Xiao village and Chunjia village were neighbors, they had some understanding of Chunjia village and knew that life in Chunjia village was not much better than that in Xiao village. Therefore, they didn't quite believe what Feng Xiang said. But, out of consideration for his feelings, Zhao Kong did not directly refuse, but simply said, "I'll think about it." Well, Li Ping glanced at Zhao Kang's face and knew the matter was most likely off, but she still refused to give up and said, "Brother Zhao, trust me, I will never harm your daughter. Although Chun Cheng's family is not rich, they are definitely a good family. When his mother came to ask me to be a matchmaker, she paid 3 taels of silver as a matchmaker." 3 taels of silver. Chapter 160a, full 4 taels. 3 taels of silver. Zhao Kong and Li were both stunned. 3 taels of silver was definitely a rare fortune for them, and Chun Cheng's mother could come up with 3 taels of silver. Perhaps the situation at Chun Cheng's home is not as bad as they imagined. The attitudes of the two changed a lot in an instant, but Zhao Kong still said, Xiao Ping, let me think about it, and I will reply to you tomorrow. After all, this matter concerns his daughter's happiness in the second half of her life. So Zhao Kong feels it's better for him to know more about it. Okay. Seeing Zhao Kong hesitant, Li Ping said nothing more, stood up and said, Then Brother Zhao, I will wait for your news. After saying that, Li Ping and Feng Xiang said goodbye to Zhao Kong and his wife and left Zhao Kang's home. Xiao Yun and Xiao Mei, did you all hear that? After the two left, Li looked towards the bedroom next to her and said, I heard it. A crisp sound came from the bedroom next door, and then two women in their 20s walked over. They were Zhao Xiaoyun and Zhao Xiaomei, who had been eavesdropping in the bedroom. Perhaps because they had just heard about their marriage, both of them looked a little embarrassed and just stood there without saying a word. What do you think of this marriage? Mrs. Li looked at the two of them and asked. Her two daughters have long exceeded the age for marriage. If they don't get married, they will probably become old maids. I don't know. Zhao Xiaoyun shook his head. Zhao Xiaomei said, It's all up to mother. There is no soil for free love in the land of Xia. Whether it is ordinary people or dignitaries, there is no possibility for young people to have free love. It is basically decided by the elders in the family. Zhao Xiaoyun and Zhao Xiaomei are not rebellious. So naturally, it is impossible for them to have the idea of free love and resist arranged marriage. Old Zhao. After hearing her two daughters' answers, Mrs. Li looked at Zhao Kong and said, What do you think? Zhao Kong frowned and thought. To be fair, when Li Ping mentioned that Lu Yin took out 3 taels of silver as a matchmaking fee, he had already made up his mind. The fact that Chun Cheng's family could pay 3 taels of silver as a matchmaking fee showed that their financial conditions were not bad, and his daughter would not suffer if she married into the family. But Zhao Kong still wants to know more about the situation in Qinjiao village before making a decision. I want to marry my daughter off. Zhao Kong pondered for a moment, and then said, But I want to know more about Chun Cheng's family situation before